it's again a very unique band and unique record. It never really gets out of it. It starts at this slow, languid pace, and it keeps that vibe through the whole record. If you come into black metal expecting blast beats, you're not going to get that. But
Mm.
the in slowing everything down and keeping everything at that pace, the sense of unease and menace that permeates through the record um, is palpable. And the just I liken it to almost being in the Hellraiser movies. Like Pinhead doesn't need to chase you down and swing his arms like a maniac. He's collected because you'll finish the moment that you walked into the room.
What is up, friends? Welcome to episode 161 of Into the Necrosphere, part 1 in my epic 3-part mega series counting down the best 30 metal albums of 2022. This week I'm joined by Nathan Glover of Graveir, Longing Maul and Gutter Prince Cabal. Nathan proffered a couple of his own selections and I counted down numbers 30 to 21 on the definitive list. But great conversation was had, one I am sure you are all going to enjoy, and one that I have been psyched about sharing with all of you, because let's be honest, 2022 was an absolute vintage year for heavy music. That is not all, though, because I could not possibly allow the legions to go a week without an installment of my weekly news rant. So straight after my conversation with Nathan, stick around, because I'm going to be listening to new tracks by Omega Infinity, Insomnium, and Sakis Tolis. And I will also be giving you my unfettered and unfiltered opinion on some of the latest metal news headlines. If you are new to the podcast and the spirit moves you to do so, please make sure that you elbow drop the subscribe button off the top rope on your platform of choice. Also, follow my fellow horsemen of the podcast apocalypse. Every Monday, Brandon Legion brings you interviews with producers, writers, actors, luminaries in the horror scene with his podcast, Horror Wolf 666. Every Wednesday, Mike Hill of Tombs and Scorpion Throne delivers another installment of the excellent and long-running Everything Went Black podcast. He is back on a Thursday with my favorite show of the week, Necromaniacs, a show that focuses on reviewing new and old horror movies. And he is, of course, joined by his co-hosts, Jeff Kashid and Mike Scandado. And then every Sunday, the Reverend Carl Haikara delivers the Devil's Message on the Lord's Day with the esoterically themed Soul Knox podcast. I am going to be on that again at some point over the next couple of months. Also, make sure that you diarize January the 31st at 10 p.m. GMT, which I think roughly translates to about 5 p.m. in the afternoon on the East Coast in the States. The first ever Into the Necrosphere YouTube live stream. I'm going to be presenting episode 162 as a live stream. I'll be joined by Evan Hopper of Quell, who all of you should know if you've followed this podcast for any period of time. We will also be joined by Dave Berardi, a longtime friend and follower of Into the Necrosphere. We will be taking some questions from all of you. We'll be shooting the breeze and something a little bit different, but one I've really been excited about doing. And if you don't watch the show on YouTube or you can't make the live stream, then don't worry. Because I will post the audio version of it probably about 2 or 3 days later. For now, though, buckle up, because I am welcoming back to the podcast my good friend Nathan Glover of Graveir. And so, to answer your question, how was my trip? Fucking fantastic. It was absolutely brilliant. The thing is, okay, first of all, really nice weather for most of it. There was one day that it was rainy, and that was about it. The water was fucking freezing. I think when I posted a thing about it on Instagram, I said on that day the water was 12. A couple of days later it was 11 degrees centigrade. But I must tell you, I think like swimming in cold seawater is amazing. Like the health benefits to it, like how much better I felt from just like like things like aches and pains that you have in your back will just all of a sudden go away. I think it's just because it helps your circulation so well. It's absolutely brilliant. And then, of course, mate, I did very severe damage to my waistline when I was there, because the food is not only fucking delicious, but the portion sizes are also ample. And the one thing that my countrymen in South Africa always find a way to do is make almost anything unhealthy. So yeah, so that was awesome. And then I went on safari, I did cool stuff like that. So dude, incredible, absolutely incredible.
Oh, look, it always looks like a good time over there. And actually, weirdly enough, at one point in my career, I almost spent like 6 months working over in Mozambique, which didn't shake out. But I know a lot of people from sort of South Africa generally just through work, and I always talk about how fantastic it is, and probably on the list of places to check out. I'll get
Dude,
there.
I strongly recommend it if you are that way inclined. It's what's name? It's look, you can't. I would say everywhere is paradise. I mean, I frankly, no disrespect to anybody from Johannesburg or something listening to this, but I personally intend to never fly north of Cape Town ever again. But yeah, I mean, Cape Town, the Western Cape is awesome. I mean, the place is still well taken care of. Unlike the fucking graffiti all over the place and the trash lying all over the place like you have here in the UK, they actually, I think, because they rely so much on tourism, they actually still take care of the place. So the municipality or the council, for folks that don't know what a municipality is, they still get the basics right. The people generally are pretty cool. Like I said, food is awesome. The place looks great. So yeah, I could not recommend it more highly. How was your Christmas and New Year's? I would imagine Christmas morning, obviously, you were in church.
Just setting the place on fire. No, look, it was good. I worked through, so I just had the public holidays off. But we didn't have any family around. We didn't have to organize anything. So literally just made some food, and I just spent a lot of time recording and like writing new stuff. So there should be a second London Mall record, but a first album on its way sometime in the near future. So yeah, I just use the time basically to sit down and be productive and continue to work on all the label stuff too, which we're pretty flat out with. So and I also got to train. I trained. Went to my striking classes on Christmas Day and New Year's Day. So for other people it might be boring, but for me it was perfect. So
yeah, well, dude, you're a fucking hard worker. Obviously you've got Longing Maul, so great to hear that's that you got more stuff coming there. I know from conversations I had with Chris that there's work going on with Graveir right now. And then you've become a fucking wheeler dealer that I hear. You're stopping people in airports, signing deals and things like that with Gutter Prince Cabal, which is also fucking cool.
Yeah, look, I don't think any of us sat down and thought that we would have got quite as much done as what we've managed to achieve. And I think we sort of sat down a few weeks back and looked back on it and go, well, there's a bunch of us have got a few really, really high quality releases out. I think people are starting to pay attention to what we're doing, and I think word is getting around. And comments are about the releases that we have done, that they've all been to a high standard. And I think from the bands themselves have generally enjoyed the experience because they're dealing with people who know what they've been through and what they're going through, and we try and look after people the way that we would want to be looked after. So just the amount of interest that we've had and how busy our schedule is for the next year, I think that shows that if you do things for the right reasons and are willing to sort of put the time and effort into it, then that pays off. And ideally, if we do it right, then we'll be helping a lot of up and coming bands from our region sort of get some attention. There's still definitely plenty of work to do around trying to get people to pick those bands up afterwards, and building out our PR networks and a few other things. You can always improve, but look, for 12 months I probably could have asked for a better 12 months, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I think you guys have had a great, a great start to things. And I was also going to comment and say, you started this with noble intentions, which is awesome. Has I guess as it's become a reality, is there anything that has changed or that has evolved from the original mission statement, which for folks not following was obviously to help elevate bands in the APAC theater, as I call it at work, and kind of get bands that wouldn't necessarily get the recognition otherwise or the exposure otherwise, into an environment where they're actually signed to a label, they're getting their music put out, and there's some degree of kind of PR marketing and profile raising behind.
Yeah, I don't know that the mission statements change, but there's always that I guess there's always that temptation there to, and we definitely have discussed it to go, well, we really enjoy working with the bands that we work with. Um, there is that temptation to keep them on and want to sort of release multiple records, but then you kind of become just like another label. And I guess that discussion that we've had is that for every, if we do 3 albums with a band, that's 2 slots that 2 other up and coming bands don't get that opportunity. So like for us, it is really just to give them a professional quality release under their belt, give them a proper release and as much PR as we can sort of give them. And the hope is that other labels will look out and go, this band's really good. We'd like to pick them up. That job becomes easier once you've got a finished product under your belt, as opposed to going, look, here's something I did on a tape recorder in my garage. That's a big risk for labels, I think, particularly in this environment. So for us to be able to send them out there with something and go, look, this is a high quality release, you can hear what it sounds like. We're not looking for like commission or anything like that. It's like, if you're interested, call us, and if we know that you are a good label and would be a good fit for those bands, we'll put you in touch. Like, to me, the best outcome would be that we see a bunch of those bands on bigger labels, like your Season and Mist or your Relapses or whoever it is, flying the flag for the region and getting some of the attention that I think even within our own region that we overlook. So the journey of even discovering stuff in some of the Asia and places like that, that even being close by, we just kind of don't know what's going on, has been quite fulfilling.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely see a band like Vicissitude, as an example, doing very, very well on a label like Transcending Obscurity or Profound Law. That's like almost a perfect fit for them. But I guess, would it not make sense if you say, for example, you guys had a band that just somehow tapped into something and got really popular? Would it not make sense to have an ongoing relationship with them and use the money generated from that band to kind of help build out the label, or are you kind of intentionally keeping things reasonably small?
Yeah, look, we've discussed that, and again, look, if we do change that mission statement, I think that we need to be open and tell people what we're changing and why. But I guess the view was, okay, let's just say some bands pick up and do really well. Well, to me, that's where we would draw the attention or get the benefit from it, is going, look, this was their first record, go back and revisit it. And also, if people look to the label as going, I'm interested to see what's going on, I will pick up those releases because those will be the bands that I need to look out for. That's kind of where it comes from. Primarily, the goal isn't really to make money. If we've got a full schedule and an empty bank account, fine. I've got to do, like, we've all got day jobs. So, as much as you want to try and run it professionally, profit is not necessarily the motive. And, again, I think if a band did pick up, it is really going back and going, look, revisit where they started at. We've got those records. We happily sell them to you, and pick it up that way. And of course, we stay in touch with the bands we work with. So if they want advice on anything, if there's ways that we can collaborate and work together. So, it'd be nice to get into live shows and the like. So if there are ways that we can work together that aren't going to starve out other up and comers, then we're definitely open to looking at what that might entail as well. So we will definitely keep working with people. It's just the question is how. And it's, probably not necessarily at this stage down the multiple release path. But
Well, actually, speaking of live shows, you guys sort of have a natural partnership there with Kelly and with Matt. So that's it. I think it's useful as well building out the network the way you're doing, because there's, as you said, when this whole deal got started, everyone or everyone who's involved with the project brings their own expertise to the table. Very, very exciting.
Yeah, look, I enjoyed, obviously meeting Kelly and Matt, and almost didn't, just for the, I tend to not really be very extroverted, is probably a nice way to put it. But I went, you know what? No, I just need to get over that and have that conversation. But we ended up having a good chat, and obviously some good things happened from there. But yeah, look, there's lots of people doing really good stuff, particularly in Australia. We've got Blight Town, Bitter Loss, Brilliant Emperor, and everyone's kind of helping each other out. That's not really a competitive thing. So there is the opportunity to go, look, what if we all got together and chucked in some money? Could we do a festival, or could we do something? So, but baby steps, you have to start from somewhere. I think it's about as good a start as we could hope for, and then you just build off that as sort of, momentum rolls. So watch this space, but yeah, that's definitely something that we've talked about.
Cool. Now, speaking of live shows, have you got your ticket for Werewolves, Ulcerate, and Mayhem?
Yes, I do. And then, yeah, there's actually quite a few good shows on, minus, I guess there was one that was cancelled, but we won't talk about that.
I was going to bring it up.
Well, I mean, yeah, we can talk about it, but there's definitely live shows have picked back up. So we've got Mayhem. There's also a festival, I think the 26th of January in Brisbane, which is an old metal venue that was closed for a long time, reopening. You've got like Malignant Aura, Altars, Woe Warden, and there's a few other. I think one of Austin's projects from Drugoth is Sightblinder. So it's a pretty solid lineup of just Australian stuff. So that's definitely one to watch out for if you happen to be in Brisbane, sort of 26th of January. But it's good to see things opening back up and bands getting back out there again, because it means things are getting a bit more back to normal, and they can start to sort of play live some of the releases we've been spoiled with over the past couple of years, including some of the ones we'll probably mention today.
Oh, without a doubt. But dude, that Werewolves, Ulcerate, Mayhem lineup is fucking beastly. I mean, it really, really is absolutely killer. I am surprised that there's not been an uproar about Mayhem playing, considering the fact that they were moaning about Taake and Akhlys.
Yeah, look, that's an interesting one. It's definitely been a big topic of discussion, and there's a whole range of things in that. I think sometimes it's just picking and art, and I think art's a funny one, because it sometimes gets held to a higher standard than what we hold corporations to, who do far worse things just for the sake of profit. So sometimes people do have things to answer for, and it's not excusing any of that stuff, but I think sometimes too people dig through people's trash, so to speak, to try and find things and then pick soft targets, because it's easier to sort of pick up a win and feel good about it than trying to do something that might be a bit more meaningful. It's not that anyone sort of agrees with any of those sort of ideologies, but I think it's that thing that I don't know that cancelling things is ever a good solution to a problem. So yeah, look, it's.
I personally don't think there's a problem to begin with. I think if you would prefer not to see Taake and Akhlys, then don't go and see them. But the other thing is, I think Taake. Let's take that as the first thing, and we'll talk about Akhlys in a second. So yes, Host has done some provocative things in the past. I have no reason to believe, based on anything I've seen with him in interviews and things like that, that this guy is a full-blown white supremacist and a Nazi. I mean, if he were, then I wouldn't support Taake. But I think lest we forget that bands like the Sex Pistols, Sepultura, a lot of older bands did similar things. I mean, Sepultura, there's photos of them wearing T-shirts with swastikas on, and they openly say now, we regret it, but they also contextualize by saying, we did it to be provocative at the time. There's no one that's going to, say to me that Host isn't should be held to a higher standard. I mean, what about Marilyn Manson? On the Golden Age of Grotesque tour, I mean, there was some real open flirting with Nazism there. And then if you move on to Akhlys, the whole entire case against against Nas is based around a Julius Evola sample on a fucking Nightbringer record. Okay, so are we going to start raking bands who used Charles Manson samples? Are we going to rake them over the coals too? Given the fact that Charles Manson was a very, very open white supremacist. His whole ideology, as a matter of fact, was based on the idea of white supremacy. So, I also, as a side note, I read the pathetic Guardian article where, the guy talks about how, Nas has openly spoken about his association with a philosophy. It's like, are you fucking kidding me? He was on my podcast, Cheyenne's podcast, and Cole's podcast, and spent upwards of 2 hours talking about how he's in no way associated with the philosophy. But you can somehow say that and get away with it because you're the Guardian.
Yeah, and I think it is that platforming thing. And it was interesting. I thought there was this whole thing against, punching down, but I guess picking artists who, are lucky to make petrol money for playing a show. Like, this isn't a business you get into for money. It's really for the love of art, and you suffer for it to an extent. That kind of seems like punching down. And, I think to your point, where there are these questions, and you don't go into a shop and ask people, what do you think about all these 5 issues before I buy a pair of shoes, right? So art, it almost seems like that thing of like video games are ruining the kid's mind, but it's just coming from a different end of the political spectrum, but it's actually the same behavior. And it's not that people don't need to answer for things, but again, it just comes to that point that the instant solution doesn't always have to be to burn everything down and cancel it. I think, as you said, having people on those podcasts and you can ask them those hard questions and put their feet to the fire if you feel that they need to have that done. You can not attend their shows and spend with your wallet. But the biggest thing you can do to push people further to the extremes is to marginalize them. Now, this is like basic stuff that you can pick up from study, right? So even it's been proven, like even with things like ISIS and that pushing someone further to the fringes is just going to make they've got nowhere else to go. So then that becomes their only home that they can go to. So you're kind of making the problem that you're trying to fight worse. Doesn't always mean it's an easy solution to talk to people and try and be patient and understand them and figure out how you can coexist and show them a better way. But just because something's hard doesn't mean that it's not worth doing. So I think this is the thing people forget. We all have to live next to each other. Yes, if someone's harassing someone at a gig or abusing them or threatening them with violence, chuck them out. Have at it. That's fine. I think that's a line that people cross. But if you think that someone thinks something you don't like, but they haven't really acted on it, I mean, it gets a bit more grey there. We could probably fill a podcast with that, but
without a doubt.
I think it's just disappointing around for.
I was about to say it's disappointing for the folks in Australia who are missing out on a potentially a great show. I've seen Taake live, fucking outstanding.
Well, Taake have been here already and played, so that ship sailed a few years ago.
So the youth is already corrupted.
Yeah.
I mean, not to labor the point, but I'll tell you what this reminds me of, and I've said it before on the show. It is exactly like the satanic panic in South Africa in the 1980s. We were given these books, rock music, the right to know. And then it's like, they'll have Fleetwood Mac, Rolling Stones, and then the really evil stuff, AC/DC. I think they did have Merciful Fate in there, but they never actually spoke openly about them. They just had an album cover. It was like AC/DC, Venom, blah, blah, blah. And then it's like, and then right at the end of the book, they're like a healthy alternative. And they've got Pat Boone and, all sorts of fucking Christian singers and stuff stuff in there. The behavior that I see right now looks exactly the same. The other day I saw yet again another article. I can't remember whether it was on Pitchfork or Rolling Stone or some shite. And this was actually related to hip hop, and it's like the misogynistic lyrics of bands like or of artists like Drake is no fun to listen to. Here are some progressive alternatives instead. It's like, fuck off, man. I'll listen to whatever I want.
I think there's definitely some moralizing that goes on that's not always consistent too. It's like, in particular with more extreme types of music, any type of outside art is going to bring a whole diverse range of people, often who probably do have views that are extreme one way or the other, across the spectrum. So it's like you can't be too surprised that but I don't know how that's necessarily any different if you went in, yeah, as you say, hip hop has its own troubles, and likewise, it's just something that people have to grapple with. But I don't know that they've found productive or healthy ways to do it. And to some extent, social media has just enabled people's worst impulses and excesses and to be instantly executed, rather than maybe taking a smarter view of it. And, you know, like I guess from a political standpoint, probably a little bit more slightly left of center. So it's interesting to have, but technically we could all be guilty by association for standing next to the wrong person or saying the wrong thing. So
yeah,
it's almost like you have to do what I say the way I say it. And if you don't do it, then, there'll be consequences. It's like, well, we've all got different standards for what we want to get into a fist fight about. Some of us would prefer to talk and try and work through things and hold people to account where they need to, and where they don't need to, let live and let live. So it's just an interesting argument that could go back and forth for days. But I just don't think that people are finding very productive ways to grapple with it. Either for or against. Sometimes people's reaction to stuff is just as dumb. So
I agree. Well, as a preview of what's to come in my top 30, which we also, just so everybody knows, here's how the format's going to work. Nathan being, I openly admit this, more knowledgeable about new music than I am. And I try and keep a head on things, but you've got like a Rain Man approach to the shit. So we're going to do his top 10 first. And then we're going to do numbers 30 to 21 of my top 30. As a preview, there are several bands on my list that would not meet with the approval of the woke. So, and proudly so. But anyway, right. So let's dive into this shit. I fully expect there's going to be stuff you're going to tell me about here that I know nothing about, and I'm not even going to pretend to try and talk my way around it. But let's start with your number 10.
Yeah, all right. I'll preface this by saying I don't really have a strict order. I just picked the top 10 albums.
I fucking dare you not come to my show prepared.
Well, I think I sat down, I always struggle with this because I enjoy different albums for different reasons and different moods. So putting one as a 1 versus 10, I find impossible. So let's go, what are the 10 albums that stuck with me the most? And there'll be a range of reasons for it. So I'll start from the top.
All right.
Pleasingly this year, there's been a few debuts as well. So all I can say is Nurgle and Isan and those ilk, and Nocturno Culto can pull their head out of their ass, because there's been some pretty good debuts this year. All right, with that insult, I'll actually kick off.
With that, be attacking metal, so extreme metal sacred cows. I saw Nurgle he's still flapping on. The other day, he was quoted as saying 99% of all metal bands sound the same. Anyway,
yeah, it seems weird to be profiting, happily collecting paychecks off something you don't seem to have much interest in, but
yeah. Anywho, all right.
All right, so for me, the first album I'll talk about is Doldrum, the knocking, or the sound that preceded their disappearance. So really enjoyed this one. It's good to hear something just refreshing, just very unhinged. It's got a very, almost like someone's trying to play with Ed Buen's end riffs, and then also, mix in some Cortez de Gaulle in with it. Maniacal vocals, really unique, interesting riffs that sound like they're playing, playing with Ed Buen's end riffs on like a Fender Strat. Great production. This year I've really come to sort of figure out that what I tend to enjoy a lot with music is an element of things being unhinged or off the rails. I don't like things being too clean and neat. I do like to feel that maybe someone's a bit nuts in some way or another. And really, the sound of this record is very occult. I liken it to if you walked into like an old Southern Gothic mansion and there was an opulent dinner party there, and then you realize all the guests were dead, and the host was just like dancing around in this suit with these corpses and like taunting you, and threatening to gouge your eyes out and just having the best time of their life while you were having the worst time of yours. That's what this album sounds like.
Mm. Yeah, I loved it. This was so the method by which I did my my favorite albums list this year was a little bit more strict than I've been with myself in the past. So I always keep at the start of every year, I keep a running playlist on Qobuz where I'll stick every single thing in, and that I want to listen to or that I like. And then invariably over time, I'll go, there'll be some quality control, some bands get removed, some bands get added. And then this year, what I did was right before I went to South Africa, I created a 2022 shortlist playlist, and then I went through every single album. And I mean, it changed so many times in terms of my overall list. It was ridiculous. And then obviously you had Mysterium and Hate Forest throw some serious curveballs in, at the end. That kind of threw everything out of whack. Doldrum was definitely on my short list. They didn't actually make it onto my my top 30, but frankly, I think it's kind of like what you said. If it caught me at the right time, it could almost certainly have been there. It's a fantastic record. It is incredibly well realized as a musical concept for a band who are putting out their debut. Though that being said, I mean, people also shouldn't mistake the band for being, a bunch of young bloods. The terrific Don McKinnon, as he is known on the Doldrum record, he was, for example, responsible for Gallows. So these guys have, they've done some things. They not necessarily like huge bands, but like this isn't their first rodeo, and you can hear it, but love it. I think it's a fantastic record. As I said, I love the concept. I love the riffing. I like that unhinged element. I'm kind of the same as you in that regard. I love that part of, I love that kind of sound with bands. So I think it's a very worthy inclusion, young man.
I think. So are we going to sort of go backwards and forwards on this, or do you want me to sort of rattle through?
No, we go next. So we'll do your full rundown of your top 10, and then we'll do mine.
Okay, no trouble.
So go on to your next one.
All right, no trouble. So next up, I think this will probably be on a few people's lists. It's the latest Bloodhouse Nord record, Disharmonium. If you wanted a soundtrack to Lovecraft, that would be it. Like, I don't think any other record has nailed what Lovecraft would sound like in sonic form the way that album does. It's got those elements of the earlier stuff like Work That Transforms God and some of the classic sound, but it just adds that extra layer of horror over the top. And it's very rare for Bloodhouse Nord to release a bad record. It's always interesting in some way or another based on the various twists and turns they take, and every album's different from the next, unless you're sort of doing a bit of a theme. But this one particularly, I think, is probably one of my favorites, just because what it went for, it really nailed. So if you want to just drive and just soak in that horror, and almost to an extent not that dissimilar to the Forest record in some ways. And I know that sounds strange, but it's just really, it's a love letter to what it is, and it's done by someone who knows, who has a really good understanding of how to place things in just the right amount so that like the effect of it is maximized. And I think this was another really strong record from someone who's got a very long track record of making fantastic albums.
It's interesting you mentioned Forest, because it was one of the things I thought about as well when I first listened to the record. I was like, you can definitely hear there's kind of some leftover, maybe not ideas, but some leftover vibe from Forest that has made its way onto this record, because it's exactly as you say. It's a quintessentially Bloodhouse Nord record. It is it draws from some of the older records, but there's definitely a kind of black metal thread, a really kind of more traditionalist black metal thread that runs through it that I actually think helps the music. But I agree with you; it's an absolutely incredible record. It's on my list as well. My first true experience of this album. So obviously I had my and I think I posted a clip of it as well. When I heard That Cannot Be Dreamed, the first single they put out, I did that on the news rant, and I was like absolutely blown away by that song. It's still actually my favorite song on the record. But my first proper experience of this record was when I came back from the Munich Hi-Fi show. We had been out all night. I discovered the electric scooters that they have in Munich, and we were on the booze a little bit, and then got onto these scooters and were just literally just riding around in the street until like 4:30 in the morning. Literally got from the scooter to running to the hotel room, getting my bags, cab taking me to the airport. So I'm still reasonably sozzled. Sat on the plane, and I put this on the headphones and listened to it for the first time. And honestly, it is like being in the middle of a fucking waking nightmare. It's one of the most like oppressively dark, just horrific sounding things that I've heard in a very, very long time. From start to finish, outstanding.
My black little heart.
And as a end-to-end experience as well, it's so absorbing, and it's so like you kind of it's like one of those records where you get to the end of it and you're almost like, what the fuck just happened to me? It's like you've been in a trance. I'd say the only thing that I kind of wish, I understand why, but I kind of wish the vocals were a little bit more prominent, or the use of actual vocal was a little bit more prominent, because it's not even really, That Cannot Be Dreamed as an example. It's really just moans and howls. It's not even vocals. That I do kind of wish was there a little bit more, but then, I also can't be a hypocrite. Given how much I raved about the Inferno record, and I actually had somebody who must have been listening to it on not the best setup ask me whether the Inferno record is an instrumental album because he couldn't hear the vocals. So yeah, but no, top notch stuff. And I'm with you in terms of the quality of their music. I really liked Hallucinogen. My favorite is still probably Cosmosophy. I know if we go by Metal Archive reviews, it's not one of the more popular ones, but there's that album always have a special place in my cold black heart. But yeah, great album, and just incredible fucking band. Also, by the way, how perfectly does that album cover encapsulate the experience of listening to the record?
Oh, nailed it. Yeah, absolutely. You look at it and you know exactly what you're in for.
Yeah. The tentacles dragging you into the netherworld kind of thing. All right. Next up.
All right. So the next one was a last minute inclusion. There were some hard cuts this year. As you said, I made to get to 10, I made some very brutal cuts. So I could easily have done a 50 and still had room. So this last one kind of snuck in at the end of the year. So it's the new Merstheming album, Medhamri. It's just got the production on it is what gets me. It's just got this reckless vibe to it. Just doesn't give a fuck. It's just straight at your neck. It just sounds like you could be in the practice shed with them, and they're spitting in your face. And I was all for it. It just, the energy of it and the way that it was produced really just it was very invigorating. I have to say that the last album, it was okay. It was a little bit more traditional heavy metal influence, but like to me, this is probably the best thing that they've done. Just again, having that unhinged vibe to it, having that feel like you're there with the record, and that's not necessarily always an easy thing to capture. But whatever they did, they nailed it on this one.
Dude, I was so blown away by this album. This actually also, it didn't just throw a spanner in the works in terms of what my overall top 30 ended up looking like, but it threw a spanner in the works of actually giving me the bandwidth to listen to the other stuff properly. Because as soon as I got into this record, I could not stop listening to it. Firstly, I think in comparison to the previous record, it makes the previous album, in my view, sound demo grade. It's just so much more kind of mature and so much more precise than the previous album. it has these hints of Marduk, these hints of like Burzum, but wrapped in a very different, quite sort of unique sounding vibe. And the one thing that it keeps making me, keeps me coming back to, I'm sure I've referenced this in the past, but in the old school Nuclear Blast days, you're going through the German descriptions of CDs and you're trying to kind of figure out what you want to listen to. And I'll never forget, in some of the Osmos productions descriptions, it would be like German, and then just like in capitals, total war, like several exclamations, and then straight away that denotes extreme quality. I kept on thinking total war when I'm listening to this record.
Yeah,
it's just like the most fucking savage, relentless album. But the nice thing about it is it's also got a lot of dynamics. It's not a one-trick pony. You sometimes you take a Panzer Division Marduk type record, right? And it's just, fucking blasting insanity, and that has its place. But this has kind of got that same venom. But I'd almost go as far as to say, to me, this had the same impact on me that Funeral Mist had last year or the year previous, where it was a late one to the game. But when you hear it, it's like, fucking hell, this is a masterclass of what modern day black metal can and should sound like. And also, this is the one where you sit Nurgle down, you go, okay, fuck face, listen to this, and then you tell me whether all black metal sounds the same or whether it's redundant or folks shouldn't be starting bands. So to Miss Tierming, I say kudos. You have put out an absolute fucking masterpiece, in my opinion. 10 out of 10. It actually earns the ultimate accolade, in my view, top notch.
I totally agree with that one.
Okay, next
one. This one might be a bit of a surprise, but I feel like this album needs a bit of attention. So, and I love
Cardi B.
Hey, no, yes, new Cardi B. I've changed my tune. I've joined the club. Hand me my membership card. No, this one. I love the band name too. Unyielding Love, Flesh of the Furnace. So, don't know if you've heard that one before. It's, what it did for me. The latest Deathspell album really was not what I listened to Deathspell for, so I didn't enjoy it. If any other band had released it, maybe I would have liked it, but it's a bit like it's not a bad album. I technically I can see why it's good, but I listened to it for that unhinged, just that murky, swirling chaos and violence, and I kind of got something a little bit more atmospheric and not really what I wanted. Unyielding Love just went, hold my beer, jumped in there, just swirling darkness and chaos. Just that murky, gross feeling that you want out of stuff. Really great song titles, great imagery, filled that void more than capably. I think their background's actually a little bit more on the sort of grind space, but I guess the way they've sort of merged it with that sort of black and death metal has just given it that chaos that you would get out of the best moments of DSO, and I guess without all the baggage that comes with some of the personnel in that band too. So this was a surprise. I've never heard of them before, but I love this album. If you haven't listened to it, I strongly recommend you jump in there. If you also felt the same way and thought the new DSO was a little bit friendly, a little bit more like atmospheric black metal rather than sonic violence, Unyielding Love.
Yeah, I know you sent this to me, but I must confess, it was one of those things where the new releases were coming so thick and fast, and I'm a man that's gainfully employed, so I only have so much time. So I didn't really spend a huge amount of time listening to it. I was just going to comment and say the record was independently released too. So look at you being a friend of the underground. But also possibly the name Unyielding Love would have put me off it. I would have gone, this sounds like post metal to me. So no can do for old Jackson.
It's such a cynical, like nasty, inversion.
Yeah.
And all the song titles and everything else is just super, super nasty. So I guess it was kind of what I was going for with the Long War record, to call it Hope. Like, it's total bullshit.
Yeah.
Almost like just digging the knife in. So very, very similar.
All right, cool. So Unyielding Love, Flesh of the Furnace. All right, next.
All right. Next one is Idol of Fear Trespasser.
Ah,
So this came out earlier in the year, but it's again a very unique band and unique record. It never really gets out of it. It starts at this slow, languid pace, and it keeps that vibe through the whole record. If you come into black metal expecting blast beats, you're not going to get that. But the in slowing everything down and keeping everything at that pace, the sense of unease and menace that permeates through the record is palpable. And the just I liken it to almost being in the Hellraiser movies. Like Pinhead doesn't need to chase you down and swing his arms like a maniac. He's collected because you'll finish the moment that you walked into the room. It's that same vibe of just that cold, calculating killer vibe where he's like, I don't need to rush. I'm going to take my time with this, and I'm going to enjoy, you suffering. I think it might upset people who want some release with their tension, but this album is all tension and no release.
yeah.
And the fact that people expect certain things and this doesn't give you that, it just breaks your balls the whole way. I think is a brave decision. I actually think it's the correct one because the atmosphere of this album is unique and not something that you'll get every day. So if you find this record is for you, I think you'll be all in on it.
Yeah, this was another contender for me. I had to unfortunately fall on the honorable mentions pile, but I did enjoy it very, very much. Also, a recommendation from you, and I agree with you. I think as far as building tension and building and creating a sense of unease when you listen to the record, I mean that's sort of what the record specializes in. But great album, absolutely fantastic. Which again is kind of a testament. I think about the honorable mentions pile that I have this year. Almost all of those albums could have made a top 10 or a top 20 in years gone by. But it's just the quality of music that's come out this year has been obscene. I mean, there's no other way to describe it. It's just, you sometimes had like, it never felt like there was like 5-6 records at a time that would come out, but it was almost every single weekend there's at least 2 that you go, okay, this is really, really good. And then there's all these things that come out of the woodwork, and then people are releasing things at the end of the year. So anyways, okay, next one.
The next one was kind of my death metal pick for the year, and look, there were so many good choices, so I'm just going to call out a few other good choices that people could have made. So the new Vermin Womb, the new Immolation, DEVENIAL Verdict, Veil Burner, Dysgnostic, and even the Vicissitude record, which we put out through our label. Not to be biased, but yeah, we only release stuff that we believe in, so I stand behind that record. All great picks. It was such a hard choice, but I had to give the slot at the end to Avaturn, the Ailing Facade. And I think what tipped that over the edge for me is it's unique, and I've always loved the vocals in Flourishing. They're gross. They just sound like someone is just on the sick bag. Like maybe, John Tardy called it Flight was a bit too long and had a few too many whiskeys and was feeling a bit ill. It's got that almost that obituary sound, but just with a bit more just disgustingness in it. But then they combine stuff like a little bit of sort of industrial type stuff and a few other elements which just kind of make it unique, and it's really, really well put together. So in the end, that was what clinched it. But yeah, great album.
Oh, one of the highlights of my year as well, I think, and it's one of those records where I particularly my top 10. The measure is generally always if I'm rushed at work and I just want to listen to some music while I'm doing something. What's my go-to? And for several months, that was kind of like my go-to, almost to a point where it was close that album could have been my number one album of the year. I agree with you with the vocals being fantastic. I didn't think of John Tardy, but you could be right. He actually reminded me a little bit of Patrick Mameli, like a more steroided up Patrick Mameli. But I mean, the scene is kind of set on that record because the way that it starts with the vocals, with it kind of fading in with that sort of weird like loop that he does, incredible. But I think it's the overall package that makes the album so unique and so interesting, because like you say, there's the industrial stuff, there's really sort of dissonant, just weird kind of almost noise rock that's in it. There's these moments of incredible like melody and stuff as well. I mean, there's a song, I think it's called Reeking Suns. I might just want to sense check myself on that. Yeah, the Reeking Suns. That's just so fucking brilliant, because it like builds up to this like epic, crescendo. So I mean, for me, it's just it's a perfect album from start to finish. I love the album cover as well, because I think the album cover sets the tone for it so well, because it's such a dark record, and it's such a, but it's dark, but it kind of has a sense of sort of mystery to it as well. Yeah, I'll not talk about it too much, because it is definitely significantly further up my list than 30 down to 21. But I was thoroughly blown away by it when I heard this album.
Did I send that one to you? I can't remember. And did you end up?
You didn't, so you can't take credit for all of the stuff that's on my list. So no, that was a self-discovery, young man.
Fantastic. But did you go back and check out Flourishing?
I have not. I do need to though.
Favor.
All right. Next. By the way, it's a disgrace that you didn't include Werewolves on your list of honorable mentions, but
yeah, I would throw that in there too. There was too many. I got nervous.
All right.
So the next one's kind of the slot of, I guess, maybe more classic type bands or something from people who are a bit more experienced. And that was the new Strigoi record, Viscera. And I think the reason this one stuck with me was a few things. I've always enjoyed Greg's work through Paradise Lost, through the Valenfire, and even the first Strigoi record. But I think on this one, this album's far more consistent, I think. He's just really hit that right patch of form. The vocals, he sounds like he's just crawled out of a crypt somewhere. And just his vocal phrasing and I guess some of the lyrics work together so well just to build that chilling, cold atmosphere. Again, it's just a case of nailing the brief, and I think you just see an artist who's been at it for a long time, that he's really at the top of his game and really mastered his craft, and that shows through on that record.
He is a phenomenon, in my opinion. I mean, I obviously, I was probably the most, the interview that I did where I was the biggest fanboy over the course of the conversation, and unashamedly so, because I've loved Paradise Lost since I heard Gothic for the very first time, and it's been amazing to see. Firstly, I've loved everything they've done anyway, so I've enjoyed the fact that they've done different stuff and tried different things. But what's been amazing for me with Valenfire and with Strigoi is that this guy who comes up with so many incredible riffs in Paradise Lost, almost just as a afterthought decides, I'm going to make some of the best death metal albums, or some of the best death metal that's been released in many, many years. And as you say, he just absolutely nails it. The 3 Valenfire records are outstanding. I think Abandon All Faith was good. It was a slight disappointment for me over Valenfire, because what I liked about Valenfire is, though there were still some of those Paradise Lost-esque moments in there, a little bit nastier, a little bit darker, but that kind of soaring melody that Greg loves to do, he still brought a bit of that in. And what I loved about Viscera is that is back. So you've got a song like Byzantine Tragedy that, it has that just little whiff of classic Greg, of Paradise Lost Greg, that just helps elevate the music substantially. It's like, it's like putting a certain seasoning on a steak. It just the steak will be nice maybe without that seasoning, but it's going to be fucking memorable with it. And that's basically what this record is all about. Almost every single song he just nails, because there's one of those moments or one of those key ingredients added to almost every single track on this record. And then the one thing that I'd say as well, just echoing your sentiment about his voice, I'm staggered by how effortless he makes it sound. It's like I know how difficult from having attempted it. And I know you know better than I do, but from having attempted vocals myself, I know how difficult it is to do vocals. Period. For a guy who's never done it, wasn't even supposed to do the vocals on Valenfire, and then he just steps in behind the mic and again delivers some of the best death metal vocal performance that I've ever heard. It's mind blowing. Firstly, I don't think he realizes how much talent he has, but he's a little bit in some ways to me like Shane Embry. It's like, I almost feel like the world overlooks just how special this guy is in terms of what he can do, and not just what he can do, but how long and how consistently he has been in just absolutely A+ form for, the last Paradise Lost album, was a bit of a disappointment, but it still had some fantastic moments. This stuff that he's doing with Nick for the Host project, absolutely incredible. And for the most part, even when Paradise Lost is off their game, they're still better than fucking 70% of bands. So a triumph in my opinion. And one of the great personal highlights of my life, getting to talk to Greg on the podcast, in case that didn't come across strongly enough.
So I get to live vicariously through you, because your lineup of guests has been stellar.
Thank you very much, mate.
So
all right,
next
up.
All right, this one is kind of more of a bit of a noise rock type direction, and look, the Ken Mode record could have been on there too, just as easily. So, and I actually owe that one to you to actually putting me on to Ken Mode, which that new album was fantastic. But I think this one just kind of took its place, and that's Chat Pile God's Country. So I don't know if you've heard that record or not, but it's almost like noise rock mixed with some Godfleshy type atmosphere bits, and they've just, I don't know, picked up, almost like they just found a guy under a bridge who's a raving lunatic and decided that he should be the vocalist. It's a mess, but it's a mess that just sounds like it could come off the rails and pull your face off your head at any particular time. And it's just even some of the lyrics that could be silly in potentially other circumstances, just I think because of the conviction in it and the palpable just lunacy that's happening through the performance, gives them this edge of really unhinged menace. I know that's probably been a theme through the top 10 so far, but what can I say? I don't want to feel safe when I listen to music. So this is another example of that. So yeah, look, if you enjoy Godflesh and you enjoy noise rock, and you enjoy being feeling discomfort at all times, this is probably a good one for you.
It's interesting with that album because I have come across an awful lot of people when it came to pulling together their best of lists of the year. They were like, yeah, it was between this one and Ken Mode. And then one or the other ends up making the list because they have quite a lot in common sonically. But yeah, I like the album as well and agree with you. That sort of sense of menace is definitely there. I think my preference was a little bit towards Ken Mode, but it's also because I've been a Ken Mode nut hugger, going all the way back to like their earlier stuff. So, but yeah, great album. All right. Where are we down to? How many do we have left for you so far, or now?
So I think we're making good time. So the next one might be a bit of a dark horse entry. So the band called Morkera, Entangled Excavations. It's a band from Croatia. It's black metal, but I guess with more sort of death metal style vocals. And yeah, just I don't know why this one really stuck with me. That album I wanted to listen to when I just wanted to listen to some good black metal. That still had a bit of a unique twist to it. It's got a great album cover. I really like the artwork to it. The riffs are interesting. It's kind of filling that sort of meat and potatoes black metal spot for me. So it's a kind of a comfort album. I just kept going back to it, and I think the fact that it was a debut and it had enough interesting and unique elements to it to make it a really good example of, like, if I just wanted to listen to a black metal album, that was the one.
I am not aware of that record whatsoever, actually. So you've potentially turned me on to something now that I do need to check out. And all things considered, the Croatian scene is actually pretty small. And as a matter of fact, I can't think off the top of my head of any band really from Croatia that I sort of actively or frequently listen to.
Me neither. So this was a bit of a surprise, and it's actually a really well produced album as well. So everything's done to a high standard.
Okay, no, I'll definitely have to check that out. But now I'm also curious about the goings on in Croatia. I mean, really, when it comes to Croatia, the only thing I think about is Krokop. So he's like synonymous to me with Croatia. Anyway, all right. Next up.
Next, last but not least. So, the final album was the new Catharia one, To Be Shunned by All as Centers of Pestilence. I guess it's been a long time between albums from Catharia. I don't know how, it was like 8-9 years, something like that, maybe even longer. But just black metal is very atypical, got some unhinged vocals. The riffs are not standard riffs. Actually, I kind of, the way that I describe it is almost like what I try to achieve, like what we try to achieve with Graveir. I think this is like the most polished version of what it would look like. So it's almost to some extent a bit of an aspirational album in the sense of like, this is what we were aiming for. But I think these guys really nailed it. And they've been around for a long time, so it was a well overdue album, and I think one that people have been waiting for. You are going to get some melodic dissonance in there, so again, not necessarily dissimilar to the way that we do things, but just done by people who really know what they're doing. They're old hands at it. They haven't burnt themselves out, so they used all that time, I think, quite wisely to put well-constructed songs together that don't always go where you think they're going to go, and just execute everything, execute things flawlessly. I really like some of the lyrical concepts. I like the album title. The artwork's great. This was just a really enjoyable listen, and one that I wasn't expecting, again, because it had been so long between albums.
And also now one that you've also thrown into the mix here that I'm going to have to listen to. So, and I'm committed to this list now. So whatever didn't make the list doesn't make the list. But yeah, again, one that passed me by. I wasn't aware of this record. I don't actually think I've listened to any Catharia albums. I might have done, but it clearly the previous one didn't necessarily have the impact on me that it needed to for me to look forward to this one.
Yeah, well, that first record I know has a fairly good, I guess, reputation from a sort of underground black metal standpoint. So but I think it was just the thing of them being so inactive for so long too. It probably dropped off a lot of people's radars. But I think there would have been a few people who were fairly excited to hear that they were doing something, and I actually think they really delivered on it. So it was worth the wait. Don't leave the next one so long would be my advice.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, and one thing that's nice to see, the German black metal scene is going very, very strong. I mean, there's almost every single year there's a healthy selection of superb stuff coming out of Germany. I mean, not least of all, one of my favorites, which was the Ulfa record. But okay, cool. So that wraps things up. Question for you, just before we talk about my stuff. Where are you guys at with new Graveir material?
Yeah, good question. So we've tracked drums for, I guess the next thing we're going to do is a split, just to give us some time to work on the album. We've had a few scheduling things and a few life events and things that have, COVID, floods, medical stuff. So there's been a whole host of things that have caused problems, but we've got an album written. We just need to get together to do it. But we decided to do a split, particularly since we got a new guitarist. So they've both written a song each. Drums are tracked. We're just trying to schedule in getting everyone around to my house where we'll track all the guitars and bass, and then I'll do the vocals. So goal would be this year. Too long for us. We're normally fairly highly productive, and yeah, the way things went really threw a spanner in the works. So keen to get something out this year if we can.
Badass. All right. Okay, so my number 30 down to 21, and unlike Nathan, I have carefully thought about the positioning of each and every one of these. So my number 30 is Temple of Void, Summoning the Slayer, which was put out by Relapse Records. I wasn't usually familiar with Temple of Void, and I remember listening to this record very briefly when it first came out, and I think I listened to the first song and then just kind of skipped on, because when you listen to the first song, it sounds like it's going to be just a very typical death metal record, and you kind of go, oh, that would have been, and also ran on Profound Lore or something like that. And then when it came up on the Decibel top 40, as much as I poked fun at them for putting out some a top 40, and I think it was like end of October or beginning of November, I did I do tend to go over those records because sometimes you pick up a few gems that you might have missed. This was definitely one of those, because when you get past that first song, which actually is pretty fucking cool when you listen to it and pay attention, but when you get past that, they start to use all these really cool, like Paradise Lost, almost Catatonia kind of influences, but in a sound that is kind of uniquely, death metal, and is, it's quite in your face and aggressive and heavy. But I think, Summoning the Slayer for me is just an example of very well executed extreme music that draws from a pretty set palette. Really, really liked it. It was actually much higher up on my list. But then a few other things kind of supplanted it. But I thought it was a fantastic album.
Yeah, I did the same thing you did, but I don't think I pushed further. So I've made a note. I'm going to go back and revisit that one because I don't like to miss out.
Dude, it beyond. So the first song is called Behind the Eye, and as I said, it's very like almost sort of morbid angel worshipping death metal, and if you listen to it as kind of part of the entire construct of the record, it's actually very, very good. But it gives you a false impression of what the rest of the album is going to sound like. Because when that album properly kicks in, I mean, there are some truly beautiful and incredible and memorable moments on the album. And it is very different to what you might think in your mind it's going to turn out to be when you listen to Behind the Eye. So kudos to them. At number 29, I've got Power from Hell, Shadows Devouring Light. One that I was familiar with Power from Hell. I've liked their stuff. Did not expect to enjoy this as much as I did, but I think this is one of those situations where a record kind of hits you at just the right time. This is a pretty straightforward kind of blackened death thrash project out of Brazil. They've been around for a long time. I think they started back in 2001. The song titles should kind of tell you everything you need to know about their allegiance to the old school. The intro song is called Forsaken by the Father, and then you've got other gems like Eve's Holy Vulva and Mother of Abominations, and but it's fucking cool. It's like a unapologetically spiteful, hateful, old school worshipping record, and no surprise if you see photos of them. They've got the leather and the spikes and the corpse paint on, and they're flying the flag high for old school values. I thought it was very, very cool, and again, a record that initially was higher up on my list, but it was supplanted by a couple of other stuff down the line. But really liked it, and a solid release from Deborah Morty, who have had another bumper year, because obviously Blood Aus Nord came out on Deborah Morty as well. And they've had a few others as well over the course of the year. Not quite the year where 4 of their albums were in my top 5, but yeah, good year all the same.
Yeah, well, you're 2 from 2. I totally missed that one. So I think the good thing about these conversations is we both get to go away with some homework and notes. So.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. Okay, at number 28, a band that I know you'll be familiar with, Destroyer 666 with Never Surrender. I like that record from the fucking second I heard the kind of intro single, which was called Guillotine, and I think has one of my favorite lyrics of the year. I think it's like, it's the grave or the gulag or the gutter for you and me. It's like so typical of a lyric that they would write. But I mean, again, this is there's no surprises as to what you can expect here. I think this is a great continuation of what they did on Wildfire. It's super enjoyable, old school black and thrash. Not as cool for me as my favorite Destroyer 666 album remains Defiance. And I don't think this quite hits that high watermark, but I mean, it's still a thoroughly enjoyable record. I did try, for the folks that were asking, I actually did try and make an interview with KK happen. But two things counted against it. One, he doesn't really like doing spoken word or kind of free form interviews like you would do on this podcast. But secondly, I did kind of I was debating in the back of my mind. It's like, okay, how much fucking guff do I want to have to put up with, having him on the podcast? So, but either way, fucking cool album and a band I love, and I don't really give a shit what the woke say.
Yeah, look, weirdly not one that I really got into, but I guess they'll a few of their. I used to enjoy some of the older stuff, and I think as they sort of went that more Motorhead direction, it wasn't really what I enjoyed, so I haven't really been able to get into it. I
mean, you must be into stuff like Unchain the Wolves and things like that.
That era is probably about where I started and stopped. And I guess maybe the other issue is maybe a bit too much over familiarity as well. He's a bit of a prickly character. So
yeah. Have you met him?
Not directly, but I definitely know a lot of obviously they've played a lot of shows, and I know a lot of people who have met him and had some indirect dealings and things as well. So
had questionable experiences with him.
Yeah, look, I think he's just he's a pretty old, hard-headed guy. He's got some pretty strong opinions that don't necessarily always line up with people's, and the better.
Well, that's the thing too. I think that's the shame of the situation we find ourselves in 20 in the 2020s, is that a guy like Louis Theroux 20 or 2 decades ago could shoot an entire documentary on hanging out with whatever sort of fringes of society you care to think about, and he's doing it because he's genuinely curious about what makes these people tick. And when we understand what makes these people tick, we can better engage with them and potentially better win over their hearts and minds and kind of bring them back to the light, so to speak. That would have been the main reason I wanted someone like KK on. He's a character I've always been curious about. I love his music, but I for sure don't agree with every single thing he's ever said.
Yeah,
but I'm curious to understand where he's coming from and his thinking, where what spawned that mindset, etc., and have that conversation. But it's just that sort of that opportunity for nuance is kind of lost in the modern day and age, because now when you have that conversation, you're platforming him, and somehow when people listen, they're going to leave the conversation totally brainwashed.
Yeah, and look, I think he's not really ever hid who he was. I think he would just tell you that he's prickly. I'm being nice about it. He'd probably just tell you he's an asshole. And I don't think he'd make any bones about it. So, you can choose to take it or leave it. That's not necessarily a knock. He is who he is, and I think he's upfront about it. And people are going to like it or they're not going to like it. So, does that reflect on the music? That's up to people to make that decision. I'm not going to tell people what they should or shouldn't do. But you can't deny, I guess, the impact that they've had and the career that they've had either.
And you also can't deny that extreme personalities make for great extreme art. I mean, I don't care what anybody says. You had to be extreme to be producing the stuff that the Norwegian masters were producing in their late teens, as an example. It's not normal people that record records like that, and we know that was made manifest in the the tragic tale of Euronymous. But anyway, I digress. Next up, another Australian entry at number 27, Psychroptic with Divine Counsel, which was put out by Prosthetic Records on the 5th of August. Of course, I had Jason Pepiat on the podcast, a fucking man's man, absolutely top dude. And also David Haley I've had on the podcast previously. He has turned into, in my opinion, potentially my favorite drummer on the planet. I think the stuff that this guy does, when I listen to Werewolves, or I listen to the Amenta, or I listen to Psychroptic, I almost can't wrap my head around how creative and how precise of a drummer he's kind of sort of morphed into over the years. I mean, I remember way back having a conversation with Eric of the Amenta about the drumming on Ocasis, the first Amenta record. And I said to him, it sounds like a drum machine. And he's like, it's not a drum machine, it's Dave. And I can assure you he's not a robot. But I mean, that is Bush League in comparison to what the guy's doing now. He's just so fucking good. Like, it's mind-boggling to me what he does. And so the thing is, it's not just that he's fast or that he's technical, it's that he's so creative and that he can play with so much feeling as well. And for me, I've always liked Psychroptic. I think my favorite Psychroptic record up to this point was the Inherited Repression. And to me, this was just one where everything just kind of slotted into line. All the stars aligned. The strengths of the band kind of came together, and it formed, one beastly whole. And I feel like everyone on this album is in absolutely top form. And I really do hope this is a record that kind of elevates them. I know they've been on tour with Fallujah and things like that, and this Fallujah record is also doing well, also a very good album. I sincerely hope Divine Council opens the eyes up of maybe folks that are not in Australia or haven't necessarily been familiar with their work before, because I feel like Psychroptic should be many times bigger than they are.
Yeah, look, Dave and Joe, I guess, played with through Ruins, and obviously Dave's been really good to us from a band standpoint. We know him quite well, and they're great. So I don't have anything bad to say. Like, if you want a nice guy as far as things go, Dave's not only a fantastic drummer, but also a fantastic person. So, but I'm just curious, I guess, with Psychroptic, because what was it about this album particularly that kind of sold you on it? And had you had periods before that with other albums that didn't? Because I know they've done some shifting in their style a little bit over time. So was there albums that you kind of didn't enjoy so much, and was this one that kind of picked you back up, or were you sort of always on that?
So I actually did not enjoy As the Kingdom Drowns as much. I didn't think it was a bad record, but it didn't have the magic of the Inherited Repression or Observant for me. Like, the thing that I liked about those records were, it was, you had technical riffing and stuff like that, but it was really kind of the melodies and how catchy and stuff the hooks were of the riffs that they were putting in, and then you combine that with everything else that they were doing extremely well. As the Kingdom Drowns maybe sounded a little bit more, I would almost say, ordinary to me, whereas Divine Council, I feel like they've kind of captured back some of that old school magic of theirs, but they've also been a little bit more experimental with this album. I mean, it's not really in your face, but there's some kind of keyboard lines in here. The album sounds more ambitious to me, and I just think overall, in terms of executing your blueprint, they've just put together 9 songs that are more memorable, that are just a better representation of their sound and of what they are about as a band.
I think I'm just a little bit I think set in my ways and what I want from them. For me, I think if they want to just make Scepter of the Ages over and over again, I'd be happy. But
I was just about to say, I was going to say that if they were to make Isle of Disenchantment over and over again, that would be your vibe.
Yeah, those first 2 records, I guess, came at the right time for me, and when I was 10, sort of, young guy. So I've got some fond memories of them. So I kind of almost don't want to leave that happy place, so to speak. So, but yeah, look, personal failings aside, I can acknowledge that they're a great band, and again, Dave and Joe and the other guys are all fantastic dudes as well. So wish them.
I'll tell you, and I'm saying this to myself, so I'll have a constant living reminder of it. I want to get Todd Stern on the podcast as well at some point.
Oh yeah,
we're connected on social media. He seems like my kind of dude, so he seems like the kind of guy I'd have a great conversation with. I'll tell you another thing. If David is listening to this, write another Ruins album as soon as possible, because Undercurrent was fucking absolutely genius. It is, that to me is like one of the most overlooked black metal albums maybe of all time. It's like if you had like a top 10 all-time overlooked, underrated black metal records, that's on the list.
Yeah, and they're great live too. Actually, always a really fun band to play with. So, not least for the fact that we get to see them play live, but just good guys to hang out with too.
Yeah. All right, next up, you mentioned it in your list of honorable mentions, but at number 26, we've got Veil Burner with their Veil Burner record. Awesome guys. It was so cool having them on the podcast and kind of hearing some of the sort of Easter eggs on the record. And this was to me, I mean, again, I know I'm somewhat late to the party because we're on album number 6, 7. Yeah, I think it's 6. And I think they've written all the way up to album number 8. But this to me was one of the big finds of 2022. I loved the singles when I heard them. Going back into their back catalog, particularly Lurkers in the Capsule of Skull, I thought was fucking incredible. And this album is just it's so unique and so interesting. It has that slight kind of almost Inquisition vibe to some of the riffing, but then you've got Chris just going buck wild with these vocals. I love vocals like that. I love it. I love when the vocal really sort of ascends to being sort of a full-blown instrument. And yeah, man, Mephisto, as far as being a riff writer and just a guy who can come up with an obscene amount of interesting creative ideas, I mean, this album is just loaded with it. And also a big shout out to Transcending Obscurity Records, because they really, as a label, are fast starting to ascend to that upper echelon now of like labels where when they put out something, I'm almost instantly interested in hearing what it sounds like, because even though no label is going to put out stuff that you like 100% of the time, but it's a mark of quality now.
Yeah, look, they're definitely killing it in the death metal space. So, and I guess also in that Asia Pacific region. I think they're based out of India. So,
yeah,
but a lot of hard work to build that up, and I think really hitting their form, as you say. And look, the Veil Burner album, great band, and it's one of those things that in the wrong hands, that whole thing could go so terribly wrong. Like in the wrong hands, it would come across goofy and not work, but they do it so well with such conviction, and nothing is a joke. And because they treat it seriously, it works, and it works fantastically well. I think it's hard to be unique a lot of the time. There's a lot of bands out there. But there are bands that nail it, and they nail it by being fearless and not treating what they do as a joke. And I think that's really, a big key to their success.
I think that's a good point. I think, with a band like Veil Burner, maximum commitment is required for you to pull off something like that effectively. Because I totally agree. It could very easily come across as just farcical. But anyway, we move on to number 25. Possibly one that will not meet with your approval, because it's very polished, but possibly the most polished record that's on my list. Septic Flesh, Modern Primitive. So I really like this album. I like the Codex Omega very, very much. I have been a fan of Septic Flesh ever since Mystic Places of Dawn, pretty much. I remember hearing Return to Carthage on the Death is Just Beginning 3 compilation that Nuclear Blast put out. And like at the time, it was like, Jesus, listen how fucking brutal that is. I liked them all the way up to and including Sumerian Demons. And then I sort of went off them for a little bit. So when they put out Communion, The Great Mass Titan, I was like, oh, no, fuck. They've sort of lost it. But they've lost me a little bit. There's too much of an emphasis on the symphonic stuff. With Codex Omega and Modern Primitive, though, I feel like they've managed to take the they've done two things in tandem. So they've actually taken the symphonic stuff and made it even more of a focal point than it was on any other record. But somehow what they've done now is they're using the orchestral stuff to enhance the heaviness and the impact of the songs, and actually almost be sort of a separate instrument all on its own. And I mean, I know it would typically come across that, but I think you know what I mean. It's almost like it's like a player called Symphony, and they're doing their own shit. It sounds just like to me that means they have now sort of hit their straps as far as their formula and their unique selling point is concerned. I think it just makes for really enjoyable extreme music. I mean, all of those songs they put out as singles, Hierophant, I think they put out The Collector as well. Absolutely superb. The whole album, to me, from start to finish, I think is excellent. It was also a lot of fun having Sotiris on. I like the concept of the record as well. I think it aligns to a lot of the stuff I've spoken about on the podcast. So good work from them. And again, good to see them still making music that is so relevant, and that continues to kind of garner them new fans after they've been around for the better part of 30 years.
Yeah, I can respect that. I don't know if you'd been looking in Music Thread or not, but we actually had a discussion on Septic Flesh earlier in the week, and I had sort of voiced that I used to enjoy. I think it was Ophidian's Wheel and Sumerian Demons, and then
Ophidian Wheel is amazing.
Yeah, and just for me, I think the risk of all those bands that are everything's super polished and super symphonic, is like I don't know if I'm going to see a live band or a bunch of backing tracks, and it just is not really what I'm there for. But they've been doing it a long time. You can't deny the fact they've been really successful with it, and it works for them. And it's not like they're playing, pop music or anything like that. But I guess it's the same thing, like the same reason that I don't really want to listen to Flesh God Apocalypse is the same reason I'm not that interested in Septic Flesh.
Yeah.
I need to be grabbed and like shaken violently by whatever it is that I'm listening to.
You see, I hate Flesh God Apocalypse. I mean, truly despise them as a band. I think they're absolutely abysmal. But I know that I can see how many folks would see that Septic Flesh and Flesh God dabble in the same place. There's something to me about Septic Flesh, and I can't put my finger on it, but there's something to me about it that's more convincing. Which is why I've stayed on that bandwagon, but I will never ever be on board with Flesh God unless they have a drastic overhaul of their sound. All right, moving on. A Nathan Glover of Graveir recommendation at number 24, Devenial Verdict with Ashblind. Oh my God, what a fucking record! And the most crazy thing about this is that it's a debut. And I don't believe that these guys have really they've done some stuff. So the drummer has been in Bastarnado, Spiteborn, not exactly big time bands. But if this is what the future of Finnish death metal is going to sound like, they got a bright future ahead of them. I mean, this is dark. It's got it's got serious like black metal vibes to it. A lot of kind of that sort of ulcerate, dissonance, that real sort of nastiness to it as well. No over reliance on blast beats, but they deploy them when they need to. It sounds angry when it needs to. It sort of dials things back when it needs to, and sort of gives you reprieve to soak in what's going on around you. It is fantastic. Again, this was like 2012. This would have been my number one record of the year without hesitation.
Yeah. Look, that was another good find. I think another Transcending Obscurity one too.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of got a little bit of almost a cinematic type vibe to it, and I don't necessarily mean in the sense like it's a film score, but it's just, as you sort of say, it's got that. It's almost like that journey is planned out, so it goes where it needs to when it needs to, but it just executes it really well. And I think the vocals are maybe a little bit more on the, not that full sort of Cookie Monster like Death Gurgle. They've kind of almost got that little bit more of a, I'm going to say like hardcore, but not really. It's almost like what you get out of those bands that are, it's almost more of a mid-range sort of death metal voice, which gives it a unique sort of feel to it as well.
Yeah, if you just had some sort of nondescript growl over this music, it would really, it would be short selling it, I think.
Yeah, and it just happens that is enough to really bring out that the vocal patterns and the lyrical content that's in there as well, and it just works.
Yeah.
So yeah, really great album.
Okay, at number 23, we've already spoken about it, but Blut aus Nord, Disharmonium. This was again as a testament to how incredible this year has been. This at one point was in my top 10, but there were quite a few things that displaced it, but still great record. The true shock, if anybody knows how big of a fan I am, is that Crowbar was also supplanted from my top 10 and top 20. So at number 22, Crowbar with Zero and Below. I mean, there's nothing really to say about it other than this. It's a Crowbar record. It's a very good Crowbar record. They've never released anything that is even remotely shit. Kirk sounds fantastic. I guess maybe if I had to say why it's not in my top 10, there's a track on this record called Denial of the Truth, which to me is like genius at a level of Broken Glass, Oddfellows Rest kind of thing. I feel like I sometimes wish when I listen to newer Crowbar that Kirk would lean into that style a lot more. He seems to really like the sort of old school kind of proto thrash, and he does it very well, and it's very cool. But when I think about Crowbar and I think about the songs that I like most about Crowbar, it's always stuff like December Spawn. It's Nothing, I Am Forever, that sort of thing. And I wish he would, because he does it so fucking well, like just do more of those, do an entire record of that. And, I wouldn't even bother with a top 30. I would just tell everybody, listen to the new Crowbar and forget everything else.
Yeah. Sure, we're not like twins or something like that. Because same thing. Like I've loved every single Crowbar album, like since forever. One of my favorite bands of all time. Do influence a lot of my guitar playing, which probably doesn't sound obvious when you listen to it, but massive influence. And same thing for me. I really lean into Sonic Excess in its purest form, Oddfellows Rest, where I think with his vocals being the way they are too, when he does choose to try and be that sort of more melodic and emotive, it really works because that voice then becomes full of a lot of pain and a lot of emotion. Like even that cover of No Quarter on the self-titled record just hits you. Whereas the thrash stuff is good. It's great, no issues with it, but it just doesn't hit as hard as some of that more, that darker, more emotive stuff. And to your point, I wish you would really lean in hard to it, because then, you could just replace all of your top 10 with that record. So,
well, one record that he did lean into it quite a bit, like of the newer or latter day Crowbar stuff, was Symmetry in Black. That which is why that album is one of my favorites of later day or later stage Crowbar. But like a song like a Marathon off of Symmetry in Black, I'm sure I've mispronounced that, but that's a really mellow, slow song. But he's got such a beautiful voice, or such an effective voice, such a hard hitting, emotional voice. I don't know why he doesn't use that more. Because, like I said, I mean, the hardcore thrash crossover stuff, it's very cool. I like it. I mean, the first single they put out off the record, Chemical Guard's great, but there's levels to Crowbar's genius, and the real genius of Zero and Below was Denial of the Truth, and I wished there would be more of those moments in, and had there been more, the album would have been ranked higher. Okay, so we're at my last one, and then we'll leave it on a cliffhanger for the legions listening. So at number 21, Haunter with a record called Discarnate Ales. They put this out on Profound Law. Profound Law had a absolutely insane year as far as good releases are concerned. This one really kind of caught me by surprise, because there were a couple of albums released that weekend, including, I think, Cosmic Putrefaction and a couple of others. And this one kind of being, just 3 tracks. I almost ignored it for a brief period, and then I think I listened to Cosmic Putrefaction, and kind of next on the 2022 playlist was this, and this was like, I liked Cosmic Putrefaction, but this just completely fucking blew my head off. It's a really diverse, really eclectic record. Very grounded in black metal principles, but a lot of progressive stuff in there. A lot of great use of melody, a lot of great use of atmosphere. It's a fucking shame that it's only 31 minutes long. There was that, that's been kind of a trend with a couple of bands this year, where they put out great, EP length records and call it a full length. I'm not so keen on that. This one kind of just made the cut, because Terzay de Horde, for example, I'm not including on my list, because even though they call it a full length, I'm very sorry, but 18 minutes is not a full length. So that's a DNQ in their box. But Haunter is like I said, they just made it, but it's fucking excellent. It's a really, really, really good album. And as I said, I mean, we spoke about Avatar, and that was Profound Lore as well. That label is really putting out top-notch stuff right now.
Yeah, I know Brendan from Alters really likes Haunter as well. I know that he'd shared that record and spoken quite highly about it. I had given it a quick listen, and it kind of just, I listened and I was like, yeah, this is okay, and I kind of let it go past. But you know, he's got pretty good taste, and I think that's 2 recommendations now, which tells me I need to go back and give it a bit more attention and a bit of a closer listen. And look, that's always the challenge of listening to so many new things all the time, and trying to sift through things. You get to hear a lot of records, but sometimes you don't get to spend the time that you would like all the time. And it's just those ones that you go back to that you know are something special. But sometimes you just overlook things because it's just the wrong time. You got too much going on, and you know, I suspect, given the two sort of recommendations that I quite respect, I'll probably find when I go back and listen to it, I'll be like, oh, I really should have listened to this more, and I'll get to enjoy it.
Yeah. The one thing I'm disappointed in, though, by the way, I didn't see you place the Fear Factory remix record in your top 10.
That was my top 10 recycle bins. That all would be good for.
Yeah. So okay, let's wrap it up with one last question as far as 2023 is concerned. So what other stuff that you're actually looking forward to? Actually, I've got 2 questions. Let's talk first about stuff coming out on Gutter Prince Cabal that people need to keep an eye out for. And then we'll talk about what you're looking forward to most in 2023.
Yeah, good question. Well, I don't necessarily want to preempt too many of our announcements, but let me just say that 2023, we've got a very full year. So in the space of the next couple of, the next couple of months, we've probably got 4 or 5 releases coming out, including our first band from Asia, which is really exciting. Look, I think people, if they pay attention and keep up, are going to find some stuff that they really enjoy that they probably wouldn't have looked at. So what I would say is, yeah, look, if you just want to follow along on our social media or YouTube, there'll be lots of announcements, and keen to see what people think and bring new bands to people's attention. And Jackie, I know I've given you a bit of a sneak peek of some of it as well, so I'm keen for your.
Well, I was about to say there will be obviously constant pushing of Brilliant Emperor stuff on this podcast, so no question about that, mate. Just as long as the quality is there.
Yeah, well, look, you know, even if you don't enjoy something, I'm always interested to hear that feedback too, because that's part of what, you know, is enjoyable about music is sharing it with like-minded people, and you know, rather than just going, that sucks, actually hearing, okay, I didn't like this because X, Y, Z, because that stuff's useful. So that was the first part, what's happening with the label, and what was the second? The
second question was, what albums are you looking forward to in 2023?
Ooh, good question. I know there's a few things in the works, and it's like, how much do you want to sort of talk about and say? You don't want to ruin people's parties. Look, I'll probably keep it general and just say, for what I'm really looking forward to is a continuation of what we've seen over the past couple of years. You know, for anyone that says music's not dangerous, it's not exciting, there's nothing happening, all I can say is that if you've had your ears open at any point, we've been spoiled the last couple of years. It is good to see that we're seeing bands put debuts out that are making top 10s, or we're seeing bands release stuff that is unique, and not just the standard stuff. Yes, when there's a lot of music out, things can be oversaturated, but to have the amount of unique and interesting stuff that we're having out at the moment, we're spoiled. I just can't follow that line of logic that there's nothing going on. So to be honest, if the trajectory just continues the way that it is, I think we'll be very spoiled. And the other part is just, you know, live shows happening again, and actually getting to catch up with people that we haven't seen for a long time, seeing bands live that we haven't had a chance to for a while, and you know, even for Graveir, our own band, is obviously just getting that back up and running as a live entity, and getting back out there and doing the things that we used to do that we've kind of not been able to do for the past couple of years because of the state of things. So it's not so much any specific albums, it is really like, what's the trajectory of extreme music, and my view is that it's extremely healthy at the moment. It's just that now things open up, how do you push that to that next level so that all of the activity that people have done when they're at home then spills over into having a healthy and thriving scene, as far as live music, interviews, people like yourselves or like Kelly or anyone that's sort of running a podcast or doing something and getting out there, because extreme music only really survives. It's not a financial windfall. Like, it's no one's doing this to be rich. Certainly no one's coming to save it. If there's any problems or when things go belly up, it's at its best when there's people who care about it putting back into it what they got out of it, and a bit more if they can. So get out to shows, buy merch, buy things from bands. As active as you are, as much passion as you put in is how healthy your music scene's going to be. And going, whether it's your local record store that stocks that kind of stuff, that as opposed to the usual garbage. So it's like any little bit that you can do will help. And as long as people are engaged and switch on and give a shit about the music that they get the benefit out of, we'll be in a pretty good state. And I think it's a good payoff for those bands that have worked really hard those past couple of years and not been able to tour and not been able to do rehearse or record in some cases.
No, I would agree with you about that. I mean, I think we've spoken to death about the old guard that just don't really pay attention to what's coming out. I think that's a redundant topic of conversation in my mind now, because they're going to keep saying what they're going to say. Fine. We'll the rest of us will enjoy what's coming out, and there's plenty coming out. So I agree with you. I think the most exciting thing for me right now is that there's so many new bands, and they put out stuff that's interesting and unique and challenging. I mean, Avaturn was I know obviously there's they're from Flourishing originally, or you had members from Flourishing in that band, but I mean there was still a debut, and listen to how fucking good it is and how unique it is. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm also looking forward to hearing, what some of the old school does. Deicide are bringing out a new record. I'm sure it'll be a disappointment, but I still want to hear it all the same. I know Marduk due to put out a new record, so that I'm excited about. Even though, once again, I'm bracing myself for some degree of disappointment. Although I have heard that they're going back to the satanic stuff, not war. So perhaps Mortus will have more of a hand in the creative process, as I believe he did with Wormwood and with Serpent Sermon. And, those two albums I think are absolutely fantastic. I think the interesting thing for me will be to see what happens at the end of the year. I fully expect that, I'll have another kind of top 20 or top 30 laden with bands I didn't know before. And that's the best part of this whole experience, is the fact that, it's not just, you don't have to rely on established names and established bands for interesting stuff. You're going to get new and great things, consistently from avenues you weren't even aware of before. So, cool. All right, my brother. I've got a dog who's scratching at the door, and I suspect wants to be taken for a walk. So I'm gonna have to hit the road. But what an absolute blast seeing you once again. All the best for 2023, man. And we will no doubt have you on the podcast again at some point. Even if it's to do, I want to maybe do this year a couple of news rant segments where I have guests on. Because it's fun to have someone to bullshit with. I mean, I can rant and rave for an hour by myself, but to have somebody to do it with will be fun as well. So maybe we can do some stuff like that.
Yeah, look, always a pleasure to come on, and it's been great to sort of catch up and sort of build this friendship. I know lots of people. I'm not necessarily friends with lots of people, so
feeling is strongly mutual, mate. So
yeah, and look, any time you want to have me on, it's always my pleasure. I always have a great time, so I appreciate that. And again, just thanks for all the hard work that you do, because as I said, it's people who put the time and the passion into to music that helps helps the overall health of it. So don't underestimate the work that you do as well.
Cool.
Not to
No, I
piss in
appreciate
your pocket, but
All right, mate. Take care of yourself.
all right, no worries. Cheers, Jackie.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
If you don't know the song, you really ought to. It is Ash Blind off the album of the same name. The band is DEVENIAL Verdict, and that record reached number 24 on my favorite albums of 2022 list. Really fun catching up with Nathan. I hope you guys enjoyed that. The fun does not stop, though, because right now, if you take your coffee with a side of social justice and a dash of soy, then get to stepping, because it's time for my weekly news rant. As always, we kick off on Metal Storm. They are probably now, or at least they should be recognized as an unofficial sponsor of Into the Necrosphere, because they, unofficial in that they don't know that they're a sponsor of Into the Necrosphere. But anyway, the first headline, Brujeria, confirmed US headline shows. Clearly no new music, so nothing for us to listen to there. But just to say, for those that may be doubters or maybe Brujeria naysayers, they are one of the most fun bands to see live that I have ever seen, and I mean that's counting probably a good 500 to 600 shows, probably more, that I had the pleasure of experiencing over the last 2 decades odd. I do think you need to, if you really want to kind of savor the Brujeria experience, I think it needs to be in a smaller club. Where the atmosphere is bordering on claustrophobic, but between all the antics on stage, El Brujo standing on stage with his machete, and you've got this Klingon-looking motherfucker that's with him as well, who's like a third vocalist. He sort of adds a bit of spice to it, but it's just it's heavy, it's groovy, it's just an awful lot of fun. And actually, I mean, I must confess, I actually don't mind their music either. It's great gym music. Nothing that's going to be setting the world on fire anytime soon. But it's awesome gym music. And I see they're going to be doing the tour in celebration of the 30th anniversary of Matando Hueros, which is a cool album, and the song is fucking fantastic. So if you're in the US and you see that pop up in a town near you, then I would strongly recommend that you go and check it out. Pantera unveiled dates for their North American tour. After reuniting and already announcing several shows for 2023, Pantera are now excited to reveal a headlining touring plan over the North America. Lamb of God will perform on this tour as special guests. That is a pretty spicy bill, I would say. Good, I think, a kind of natural marriage as well, because there's no doubt about it that Lamb of God probably in some ways picked up where Pantera left off, and you would hope that the fact that they are sharing a tour, sharing a stage, means maybe you see some cool spontaneous stuff. Randy coming out doing a cover of Walk or something like that. So. Anyways, next up, Dark Throne to release Goat Lord Original. It says here, Dark Throne announced the release of a new music output, Goat Lord Original, on the 10th of February through Peaceful Records. It contains tracks from the Goat Lord album in their original instrumental form, recorded in the band's rehearsal space, with vocals added in the mid-90s before an official release came through Moonfog Productions in 1996. So I'm sure most of you know the backstory to this. I believe that Goat Lord was meant to be the sequel to Soulside Journey, which was the debut Dark Throne record, an album that was a lot more kind of death metal in its sound, had a bit of a Entombed Left Hand Path kind of vibe to it. And they shelved the record because they were busy working on A Blaze in the Northern Sky, and then eventually decided to release it in 1996. And it's not a bad record at all. It definitely has some of the hallmarks of Dark Throne. It's kind of called a doomy death metal record, but I think that probably doesn't quite do it justice, because as much as it has elements of both, to my ears at least, it's unmistakable as a Dark Throne album. But it says, yeah, the intended second album of the Norwegian Legends was the title of what was to originally be Darkthrone's second album. The style very much followed in the vein of the debut Soulside Journey, with a mid-paced, melodic yet technical death metal style. After the full completion of the tracks, however, focus shifted towards black metal and a more primitive style of composition, and so the album was shelved while work commenced on what was to be a black metal milestone, Ablaze in the Northern Sky, which incorporated some parts from the Goatlord tracks. So, I mean, does the world need an instrumental version of that album? I would hasten to say probably not. But I do quite like the cover art that they've got for this. Certainly a massive step up from old Fenris at Family Ice Skating Day, which was the album cover of last year's release. I think that press release that we've just read through is a bit disingenuous because it's not new musical output. I mean, these songs are fucking old. And I would also, just as a side note, say that whoever did that album cover should maybe offer his services to the lads in Cattle Decapitation. I recently checked out a couple of minutes of Jamie Jaster because, once in a while I quite hearing just what he's up to. I've always liked him. I like Hatebreed's music, at least some of it. And it was interesting. He was talking in the intro to the show that basically commenting, saying, he doesn't understand all the haters of the new Cattle Decapitation album cover. People just want something to complain about. I don't think that's quite fair. I speak as a pretty massive fan of that band. I just think the album cover sucks, and I've actually continued to dislike it with greater intensity, greater passion with every passing week. So hopefully the music is great. I fully expect that it will be, but the album cover stinks. That album cover and The Last Dark Throne are on a par as far as a shit album artwork is concerned. But just getting back to Goatlord, so I was kind of thinking when I saw this article, what are my favorite what are my favorite Darkthrone albums? And most likely, my top 5 will disqualify me from the debate on whether or not Darkthrone is, or any sort of Darkthrone related debate, I should say. But let me give it to you guys anyway. So off the top of my head, without the kind of critical or intensely critical comparative listening that went into my my top 30 of 2022, my top 5 Darkthrone records. At number 5, probably Transylvanian Hunger. At number 4, Sardonic Wrath. Those two could be interchangeable, but yeah. Number 3, Blaze in the Northern Sky. Number 2, and I think this is where the disqualification probably kicks in, Plague Wielder. And at number 1, all of the preceding releases, that could be interchangeable depending on my mood on the day. But my number 1 is set in stone, no debate whatsoever. And it is, of course, Hate Them, which is a absolutely perfect, pitch perfect piece of black metal. And one that clearly I don't think Darkthrone are ever going to come close to equaling. But I thought I would just mention that as an aside. Okay, let's move on. Speaking of the old guard, Metallica present Screaming Suicide, which is the second single, I believe, off of their upcoming 72 Seasons album. Of course, Lux Eterna didn't necessarily meet with critical acclaim on the News Rant segment. And I must say, as I've seen more and more videos comparing it to Hit the Lights, I've probably come to dislike it even more. I mean, it's not complete trash, but it's, I think with the exception of Kirk's solo, which I think is pretty decent, and the fact that James is, I think, sounding better than he has for quite some time. He sounds better live, and that is certainly translated to, the first new song we heard. The rest of the track just doesn't do all that much for me. So let's find out whether Screaming Suicide is any different. It says here, after unveiling details and the first single off their upcoming 72 Seasons album, Metallica now premiered the official video for the second single called Screaming Suicide. The album arrives on April the 14th, 2023. The band says of the track, Screaming Suicide addresses the taboo word of suicide. The intention is to communicate about the darkness we feel inside. It's ridiculous to think that we should deny that we have these thoughts at one point or another. I believe most people have thought about it. To face it is to speak the unspoken. If it's a human experience, we should be able to talk about it. You are not alone. With the emphasis on mental health that there has been over the last probably 5 years, has anybody really thought, or does anybody still really think of suicide as a taboo word? I'd be curious to know all of your thoughts, but I certainly don't get the impression that's the case. But anyway, let's put that aside. The song that they've done about this, a similar topic that most readily comes to mind, of course, is Fade to Black. When I say song, previous to Screaming Suicide. So Screaming Suicide has an awful lot to live up to, because Fade to Black is a absolutely note perfect masterpiece. But I'll shut my mouth and hit play. Let's hear what they've come up with for single number 2. Do my eyes or my ears deceive me? But that sounds like a triplet on the double bass. I don't know whether Lars got somebody to do that for him, or whether he's actually decided to be less full rud, and more the Lars of yesteryear. And by yesteryear, I mean the early to mid '80s on the new stuff. But I don't like that riff. But I'll hold judgment because I want to hear the verse. I want to hear the chorus first. So let's get back to it. So I've got 3 problems with this song. Problem 1 is that it reminds me of Fuel, which is one of the worst songs in the Metallica discography. Problem 2 is that it reminds me of Moth into a Flame, which is one of the other worst songs in the Metallica discography. But the other thing is, with the exception of the fact that once again the vocals are sounding better than James has done for a while, and the bridge in that song is actually not too bad, this feels to me like, these AI songs, I think it's called Chat GPT or whatever the hell it is. These AI songs that they're putting out that sounds like a band, like there's like, I think there was like a Christmas song that was supposed to sound like Slipknot, which an AI, AI algorithm or whatever the fuck you call it had programmed. This to me feels like an AI version of a Metallica song. It doesn't feel like Metallica. And, again, maybe it's because Metallica no longer make music for folks like you or I. You know, people that are into the extremist side of things. But I have to say, I saw Metallica do 2 acoustic or semi-acoustic covers at they did a charity show for that Helping Hands foundation of theirs. They posted it on their website. Oh, it's not on their website, sorry, on their YouTube page. And I'm probably gonna run the risk here of being declared non-cult, but I don't give a fuck. I personally think that if Metallica were to make an entire album that sounds like the clip that I'm about to play to you now, I would be over the moon. And in my view, it would be the best thing that they've done since probably And Justice for All. So you guys know the kind of music I'm normally into. I think it's a big shout for me to say that. But this, to me, when I hear them perform this, it just feels like this is the style and the vibe of music that they are far more passionate about and just seem to be far more comfortable producing. But I'll let you guys give me your thoughts on it. Let's give it a quick spin. I love it. I absolutely love that. And I mean, I know they're Metallica. They're meant to be a metal band. I'm sure there will be far more people up in arms about a record that sounds like that, than a foul-mouthed South African man on his extreme metal podcast saying, "I want to hear a Metallica acoustic record instead of the faux thrash or the fake metal that they're producing right now." But that's just my thoughts. But yeah, Screaming Suicide. Every Metallica record over the last couple of years has at least had one decent song. So I'd say even Saint Anger, which was absolutely atrocious. It did have the Unnamed Feeling, which I think is quite a cool tune. Death Magnetic, I can't really remember what that had that I liked, but I'm sure it had at least one song. And again, can't remember off the top of my head what the tune was, but on that last record of theirs, there was one song in particular that stood out that I thought was excellent. I fully expect there will be at least one song that I like on 72 Seasons, but Screaming Suicide is not that song. So, let's move on. The next headline is Isengrim, who have put out a new single and music video. It says, black metal maniacs from Finland, Isengrim, put out a brand new single called Jumalade. The accompanying music video directed, shot, and edited by Jupe Velen at Moving Mountains Productions. Additional camera work by Samuel Lindros. Exciting things happening in Finland. Again, much like most of the most major metal theaters, you've got the old guard like And Ocean's doing some great stuff. You've got DEVENIAL Verdict, who I played earlier, doing just phenomenal work. I've never heard of Isengrim before, but seems like they are black metal promotion approved. So they are at the very least worth a quick listen. Plus, if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll see the vocalist is wearing a death patch on his battle jacket, which, that's at least a tick in the box in terms of his personality. So let's hear what Isengrim sounds like. I think the drummer is pretty competent, even though I've that blast that he goes into there, I'm not as keen on. But what he did previous, earlier on in the song, I thought worked well. The riff is okay. Kind of has a bit of a folky element to it. And I think the vocalist, again, competent, but I'm not necessarily a fan of really high-pitched vocals. There are exceptions for sure. But in this instance, I don't really think I wouldn't class that as an exception. It's not bad, but it is B tier at the moment. So let's get back to it. Nice touch that everyone in the band seems to get an opportunity to toss in a little vocal line there. I thought that the one, I believe it would be one of the guitarists, the long-haired guitarist, not the bald fellow or the short-haired fellow who stands there with his woolly mittens. I thought his vocals were pretty good. And actually, around the 2-minute mark where the song kind of shifts gears and it kind of has more of a black and thrash feel. I think that's pretty good. But you can definitely hear these guys have been on a steady diet of late 90s, early 2000s melodic black metal, and then probably one of the guys in the band is a big fan of Destroyer 666 and stuff like Archgoat. So I think for some folks this will probably work. As I said, I do not think this is bad. I don't necessarily think it's something that, based on the quality of music coming out right now, I'm going to want to return to, with any sense of urgency anytime soon. What I will certainly never listen to nor want to return to is Baby Metal, who apparently are going to release a new studio album. Shame on the Metal Storm guys for even giving oxygen to this fucking trash. But on a far, far more positive note, Omega Infinity are debuting their new single. The song is called To the Stars. Long-time students of Into the Necrosphere will recall that Zen and Tentacle, the two gentlemen responsible for Omega Infinity, have been on the podcast twice. I had them on doing an actual interview, and then I also had them on doing a countdown, I think, of 2020's best records. But great guys. I really, really enjoyed their previous record, their debut. So I've been looking forward to this one for a while, and as far as I know, it's actually been done for a while. I don't know whether they went back and did some rewrites and whatnot, but a very unique sounding or very unique take on black metal. But even though a lot of bands have kind of brought the cosmic elements in and the kind of the sci-fi sounding vibe to black metal, I think they did it in such a way that really sort of kept a genuine, palpable darkness to it, and I love that. So, without further ado, let's hear the first, it says the second advanced single. Jesus, I missed the first one. That must have come out while I was on holiday. So anyway, it says here, To the Stars, the second advanced single from Omega Infinity's forthcoming studio record, The Anti-Current, has premiered in the form of an official music video. The new outing will be released by Season of Mist on the 24th of February. Yeah, don't know how I missed that first one. But anyway, I've been excited to hear this for a while, so here we go. just want to take 10 seconds here to appreciate how absolutely fantastic Zen's voice is. Some of you folks that aren't familiar with Omega Infinity might know his other band, Neo Obliviscaris. Very, very different style of music to Omega Infinity. But, when that song kicks off, you've got kind of a, reasonably basic riff, that sounds almost slightly sort of primitive in its feel. There's it's like a sci-fi burzum sort of element to it. And it's something that if the wrong vocalist had been assigned to to sing on the track, I think it could very easily have kind of fallen apart and just lost any of its impact. But when that absolute beast steps up to the microphone, and he starts giving these like inhuman growls and just full on badass or masterclass in badassery. Everything just comes together and that song just soars. So, I mean, top-notch work there, I think. And then so far, I'm feeling it. We're 54 seconds in. I think I paused it right around a bit of a gear shift. So I'm going to get back to it. But so far, really, really liking this. The song has kind of like the same vibe. I mean, very similar to the vibe that was on the debut record. When I think of, or when I listen to this, you can visualize this black hole with these transmissions, like these weird melodic transmissions coming out of it, and sort of flying at you, at a speed. And then, as I said, you've got this, demonic growling specimen, sort of, again, pulling it all together on the microphone. But yeah, like I said, really, really like that. It's maybe not entirely what I expected, but I say that in a good way. It feels like they've taken a lot of the elements of the first record and they've cranked the volume up significantly. So very excited about hearing the full record. And fortunately, because they are represented by a quality record label, who is staffed by one of the, if not the best PR person in the business, I think there's probably a very good chance that I will be able to get them on the podcast. So once the 3-part mega series, that is the top 30 of 2022 countdown, is complete, I will definitely try and line that up. Okay, on foot, Dodds Rajtson. Again, I've probably massacred the pronunciation of both band name and song, but either way, let's say Onfot is their name. And as part of their forthcoming studio release, it says, which is due out on April the 28th, 2023, they've launched a new preview tune called Dots Regson. So again, another black metal promotion approved track premiere, and therefore I'm keen to hear what it sounds like. very promising, very aggressive. It's got kind of a really rough, in-your-face production. Whoever is drumming for them, I think, is doing a great job. And again, I like those vocals. Really snarling, menacing, aggressive vocals. It has that verging on unhinged feel that I dig, and clearly my guest of this week, Nathan, really liked as well. So far so good. You all know I'm a sucker for a breakdown. Here's something else I'm a sucker for: an echo at the end of a verse or the end of a line. And I love that bit that they just did there. I don't know what it is about it. It just adds like a sense of menace to it. But no, I like that very much. So Onfod goes on the list of bands whose next release I will definitely be looking out for. Liking that very, very much. By the way, while I look for the next headline to talk about, I don't know who of you caught the first episode of The Last of Us TV show, which, of course, for those very few of you, I would assume, that don't know, is a TV adaptation of the video game. I'm a massive fan of both games. I mean, the second game was very controversial because of a couple of things that happened in the story, which I'll get to in just a second. But, both games, as far as I'm concerned, in terms of like the survival horror genre, I don't think anything better has been created. Certainly not before, not since. I think they did a great job of this debut episode. Pedro Pascal is the man who's tasked with playing Joel. I can't remember the name of the actress who is Ellie. Pedro Pascal looks slightly like Joel from the game. The Ellie actress, not so much, but I think she does a decent job. I mean, she certainly seems to kind of get what Ellie is about as a character. And I know as well that apparently this show was the biggest premiere for HBO since the premiere of House of the Dragon. And I think it might be their second highest premiere since 2010, something like 4.3 Nielsen rating. I don't know what that translates to in terms of millions of viewers, but again, did really well. The reviews are really good. What I did think, though, I've heard from the showrunner that apparently they kind of wrap up the entirety of the first game in the 9 episodes of season 1. I would be very curious to see whether or not they are able to survive the twist in the tale that will undoubtedly have to occur if they're going to stay true to the game's narrative in the second season. Because it's one thing to play that as a gamer, and kind of embrace the fact that you've gone down a somewhat surprising path. There's going to be different things that happen, things that you didn't expect, and it changes the gameplay experience, but actually not in a bad way. The viewing experience is going to be very different, though, and I feel like potentially kind of rips the soul out of the story somewhat. And I would not be surprised to see a lot of people being turned off by it. I mean, like if you go back to a show like Westworld, which I really, really enjoyed the first 2 seasons, then they decided to take the show out of the park that it's based in, for seasons 1 and 2. And unsurprisingly, the vast majority of the audience said, well, I'm out, and including myself. I managed to make it through 10 minutes of the first episode of the 3rd season, and I was like, I'm not watching this shit any longer. And now, I think season 4, did so poorly that I think HBO took it off their premium channel, and I think they've given the show to free TV now. I'll make a prediction and say I do not see Last of Us going beyond 2 seasons. I think season 1's going to win critical acclaim. I think it's going to do really well. I think people are really going to like it. I think if they stick to the game narrative, which I think that they should, because I almost feel like in a way the backlash might be even worse if they don't. But if they do, there will be no season 3, not from my perspective. So I might be wrong, but year on the or in the year of our Lord 2023, on the 23rd of January is when I'm recording this. I have made a proclamation that is what's going to happen. So we'll see. Anyway, next up, we've got Sakis Tolis, he of Rotting Christ fame, dropping a new single. It says, in a series of newly released singles over the past few weeks, Greek metal master Sakis Tolis now premieres another one. Give a spin to the song Here Comes the Sun via the Bandcamp widget down under, so as to spare my faithful listeners of smashing their car windows or permanently damaging their eardrums. Let me just look this up on YouTube rather than play the Bandcamp widget. Bear with me 10 seconds. So here we go. I have no reason to believe that Here Comes the Sun is a cover of the Beatles song, but I will make a prediction. I suspect it's going to sound an awful lot like the Sleep of the Angels, Dead Poem vibe that Sakis has been going down of late. And that's not a bad thing. I'll explain why in a second, but, let's hear what the song sounds like first. Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun. Color me not surprised. As I predicted, it sounds like it could very, very easily have been a track off of, especially Sleep of the Angels. Not bad. I had Sakis Tolis on at the beginning of last year, as some of you might recall, and he definitely came across to me in that conversation as a man who, had come face to face with these personal demons over the course of the pandemic. And I come out the other side feeling a lot more hopeful and, probably feeling somewhat like a changed man. So I'm not surprised that there's definitely a sense of that in his music. Almost a sense of positivity in the stuff that he's been releasing of late. I do hope, though, that we will see maybe more of a return to the darker side of stuff. The darker side of the musical spectrum when the next Rotting Christ album eventually gets released. And I'm particularly referencing my favorite period of Rotting Christ, which is Theogonia, Ailo. I'm not going to bother trying to pronounce the subsequent record's name. And I like Rituals very much as well. I thought that, The Heretics wasn't a bad record, but it didn't have the impact on me that those albums had. Those albums kind of had that Greek mythology, you feel like you're in the thick of battle when you hear the songs. They reminded me an awful lot of 300 actually. But there was something incredibly special about all of those albums. And, not that I wish for them to repeat themselves if they're not inspired to do so, but they were harder hitting, they were darker, they were just more up my alley. So I hope that if this is the direction that Sakis is going with his solo stuff, that he kind of works that out of his system creatively, and that maybe some of the more sinister shit is reserved for for some new Rotting Christ material. But as I said, this is not bad so far, and I'm willing to give it another 50 seconds or so, and let's hear where the song goes. Yeah, not sure it's going to go, to any particularly, or it's going to deviate massively from the trend or the track that it's on right now. So let's move on. Gojira announced the Mega Monsters tour with Mastodon, two bands whose stock has absolutely plummeted. The FTX stock, like it's plummeted like a Logan Paul NFT. Which, by the way, that's something that I got into a little bit when I was on holiday. I'm sure some of you know the CoffeeZilla YouTube channel. Very interesting to see some of the riffraff that he calls to task on that channel, particularly Logan Paul in some of his recent stuff. I mean, that guy, I don't like Logan Paul or Jake Paul. I think they're absolute fucking assholes, and I pray for the day when when a dude who isn't 20 years past his prime gets in the ring with either Jake or Logan and knocks their heads into the third row. But that aside, old Logan did people dirty with that Crypto Zoo NFT of his, and it made me actually revise my opinion on NFTs pretty dramatically. I think it is a worthless load of shit. And I almost don't necessarily want to see it made illegal, because I feel like the people that are investing $100,000 and $500,000 into something that is essentially completely and utterly worthless, they deserve to lose their money. And I think that this is kind of it's a way for us to publicly separate the weak-minded from people that have at least a fucking shred of common sense. But anyways, yeah, CoffeeZilla, massively entertaining, by the way. If you're looking to pass 25 minutes, the dude is a pretty relentless investigator. Insomnium, the Witch Hunter single unleashed. The Witch Hunter, the third single from Insomnium's next long player, Anno 1696, has premiered via YouTube in the form of a visualizer video. The new outing is ready for a February 24th official release via Century Media Records. Insomnium are one of these bands that is kind of a glitch in my own personal matrix, by which I mean they do almost everything that I have derided, mocked, and openly said I think is complete rubbish on this very new segment, and yet for whatever reason they always seem to make something that actually I find myself really enjoying when I listen to it. They're not a go-to band necessarily, but I thought that previous single, I think it's the previous single that they put out for this record, White Christ, I thought was pretty good. And I'm curious to hear what the Witch Hunter sounds like. Again, I don't think I've actually ever heard a record that they've put out that I thought was just completely pants. The song title White Christ, of course, we know that Metal Twitter at least will be investigating Insomnium's members for connections to the far right. But anyway, let's put all that nonsense aside, and let's hear what the Witch Hunter sounds like. Yeah, I mean, again, I concede. The production is maybe a little too clean. It's very melodic. It certainly doesn't sound in any way menacing or dangerous. And I think I could probably play this with my mom in the car, and she won't object to it whatsoever. And yet, for whatever reason, I like it. I just think Insomnium, in terms of this style of music, I feel like there's not really a band that do it any better than they do. So well done to them. I think that's good stuff. Okay, next up we've got Imperium Decadence, who debut their Forests in Gale single. I like the last Imperium Decadence record. They've been a band that I've kind of had that I've enjoyed on and off over the years, and I hadn't actually even realized that they were going to put out a new record. It actually came out yesterday at the time of my recording this, so definitely one I'm going to need to spend a bit of time listening to. I honestly didn't really have time to listen to anything this week. I think the only thing that I properly listened to was the latest episode of Necromaniacs, because that's in terms of like podcast listening, that takes priority. And then music, I'm still kind of going, I'm still actually stuck on that Mysterium record. And I'm still, listening to, the short list from 2023, but definitely something that I'm going to need to spend a bit of time with, because as I said, the last Imperium Decadence record, very good. So let's hear if Forests in Gale is a nice continuation from that particular release. That last record was called, I think it's When We Are Forgotten. I just needed to remind myself of that now. But that was good. I actually think this sounds better so far. This is very, very cool stuff. And again, it's there's nothing remarkable about it, but just everything here works really well. The rhythm is great. Love the riff. I think the vocals sound cool. Love the whole atmosphere of the song. I think it's good stuff. And like I said, I think the year is off to a pretty solid start. I mean, that Vothroch record from last year was fucking cool. Not last year, sorry, from last week. This is cool. And there's a bunch of stuff coming out over the next couple of weeks that, is excellent. And then obviously we've got a lot to look forward to for the remainder of the year as well. Again, would not be surprised if we hear some new Mayhem. Wouldn't be surprised if we hear something new by Werewolves. Big shout out to Werewolves as well. They apparently, I've had some feedback now from a couple of folks. Apparently, they absolutely fucking killed it when they opened for Ulcerate and Mayhem in Australia the last couple of days. And firstly, I know how much that would have meant to all of those dudes. Secondly, I think it is awesome that they're getting the right degree of exposure, because they definitely deserve it. And I'm not surprised that their music went over well with the audience either. So still very jealous that I wasn't there to see it though. Anyway, Lamp of Murmur, third studio record completed and detailed. It says here that March the 26th, 2023, one day before old Jackson's 43rd birthday, sees the release of Lamp of Murmur's third full-length installment, Saturnian Bloodstorm. It'll be released through Argento Records in the EU and Not Cult in the USA. To taste the first piece of it, give it a listen to the opening track, Conqueror Beyond the Frenzied Fog. Again, this is on Bandcamp, so let me head over to YouTube and see if I can pick it up there. I have never really gotten into Lamp of Murmur, not for any other reason that it's just one of those things where I see a lot of people raving about them, but then again, for whatever reason, I'm just not. I'm just not that way inclined to want to listen to them. So feels like probably it's time for that to change. Because as I said, there's a lot of guys that, or a lot of black metal folk on the socials that bust a nut every time, you know, those 3 words, Lamp of Murmur, are mentioned. So let's find out if the hype is justified. I don't know if it's the guitar sound or if it's just the riff itself, but this reminds me a little bit of an Abyss Studios recording, maybe something like Sons of Northern Darkness by Immortal. It's got a similar guitar sound. It's got that kind of clean, semi-clean guitar, that bookends the opening riff or the opening passage. Not bad so far. Does it necessarily justify the excitement that I see every time this band's name is mentioned? I'm not sure, but I mean, it's also only 120, 130 seconds. So I think they actually, in this instance, 90 seconds. Pardon my broken math, but I think they at least deserve another 60 seconds. So let's get back to it. Right there. I mean, that's vintage. It sounds like vintage Abyss Studios. I wonder whether or not this was recorded at Abyss Studios. I'll let it play whilst I look this up on my phone, because it's going to bug me if I don't solve this mystery today.
God
end up listening to the whole entire song before I get to the bottom of this. But like I said, that sounds to me like a Peter Tacton recording. I like it, though. I think the song's good. Definitely, I mean, I need to spend a bit more time with these guys, I think, to form a proper opinion of their ranking in on the ultimate list, the Into the Necrosphere list. But I mean, I'm certainly open to doing so. That sounds like good stuff. In Flames reveal Meet Your Maker single. I saw somebody today post that it's the best record they've put out in 20 years, to which I almost wanted to comment. They haven't put out a good record in 50 years. So they haven't put out a good record ever. I think that is pretty much about it for Metal Storm this week. So let's head over to blabbermouth.net, see if there's anything there that we can at the very least poke fun at. Charlie Benante to miss the next few shows on Anthrax's tour with Black Label Society. Temporary replacement announced. I'm not surprised there. I would assume he's making maybe, as the NFT folk would say, 5x what he would make or playing with Pantera than what he would make playing with Anthrax. Like I said last week, I take back what I said about my opening comment about his drumming when I saw that the first clips of the of the Pantera reunion. He definitely, in the subsequent clips, and maybe it was the recording of that first one, but on subsequent shots I've seen of that, he sounds really, really good. He's definitely got a handle of it, and it cannot be easy because Vinnie Paul as a drummer was just absolutely incredible. Wonderful news. Slipknot's Corey Taylor has begun recording his second studio album, and I mean, we can only hope that it's as crushingly brutal as the first one that he did when he was running around with his Corey motherfucking Taylor wrestling belt. Anyway, but speaking of brutal dudes, Ishon has announced Fascination Street Sessions EP. It says here Norwegian progressive metal pioneer Ishon will release a new EP called Fascination Street Sessions on March the 24th via Candlelight Records. The first single from the effort, Contorted Monuments, can be streamed below. Known as a constantly evolving artist who loves to transcend boundaries, Ishon's musical journey has been relentlessly fascinating and frequently revelatory. I know the great revelation was that The Weeknd is darker than all black metal being released post-1998. With his penchant for collaborative projects and fascination with production, this new 3-track EP featuring 2 new original songs and 1 cover version is the direct result of Ishon joining forces with URM Academy's online educational program for music production and producer-engineer Jens Bogren of Fascination Street Studios. There seems to be an awful lot of fluff in that press release, but I'm going to take a deep breath because I want to try and clear my mind of any prejudice. And then I'm going to listen to this, but I must confess, I would be very surprised if this is not total shite. So here we go. It's unique, I'll give him that. And actually, I think where the song slows down, I think it actually gets a little bit better. For the style of music that he's making right now, honestly, he can ditch those proto black metal vocals that he's doing. It's one thing to do them on a black metal song, and I know that it's his signature, but it doesn't really suit this kind of music anymore, in my opinion. Some will most likely disagree, but I would say he would actually be better served just by just walk away from black metal entirely and make the music that you want to make. We had King Dude on the podcast last year. He was doing that death metal project of his. Wasn't feeling it anymore, and has now gone on to do really cool, exciting, interesting things with King Dude. But it would have sounded farcical had he decided to do the King Dude music with death metal vocals. So kind of feel like the same thing's going on. Yeah, he should just stop the screams altogether. And just no longer make anything that's no longer even pretend that this is extreme music or this is metal. But anyways, I do want to hear though where it goes to during this chorus, because like I said, that actually sounded pretty decent.
Failing I and find someone to blame, feeding on the shame of those who try to stay alive. This mockery of life, let them shiver in the shadow of their own contorted monuments, and then bring back the old gods of Lord and violent powers, of mystery and legend, of fearlessness that will outlast these feeble illusions, of the privileged, of the righteous, of masses, of nations, of rebel, of followers, of now.
Yeah, that whole entire sequence would have been infinitely better had he just been doing clean singing there. As I said, it's not bad. Some of the stuff I've heard him do is way worse. The music that he did on that Telemark EP was a fucking million times worse than that tune that we've just heard. But I just think if you're no longer inspired to make a certain kind of music, then just ditch it altogether. Don't even try, no matter what people expect of you, because it just comes across as disingenuous. Next headline, Duff McKagan says Guns N' Roses will play this year's Glastonbury Festival. I am willing to bet, this is another proclamation that I will make on this installment of the news rant, and we'll see whether it comes true. If that gets announced, I guarantee you there's going to be several articles plastered across The Guardian, reading something to the effect of, Guns N' Roses have a history of misogynistic lyrics. Here's why that's a problem. Welcome to the Jungle pokes fun at women who choose not to shave their pubic hair. Here's why that's problematic. It'll be a lengthy trawl through every single Guns N' Roses song ever written. 1 in a million will be brought up. It's So Easy will be brought up. Rocket Queen will be brought up, and it's going to be about how it's misogynistic and hateful and racist and homophobic, and it has no place at Glastonbury. And frankly, that's what it should be, because Glastonbury fucking sucks, and I don't think Guns N' Roses should even bother entertaining the idea of playing there. I don't care how big of a band they are. Also, side note, Pretty Tied Up, Estranged, and let's think, maybe 14 years are 3 of the best Guns N' Roses songs ever written. Actually, Pretty Tied Up, Estranged, 14 years. There we go. My favorite Guns N' Roses songs. The Garden I would add to that list as well. Any other opinion contradicting that is wrong, and you're wrong to have it. Another opinion is, and I thought about this randomly because I was listening to a lot of Guns N' Roses when I was driving to various spots when we were in South Africa, because there's only so much black metal I can inflict on poor Paige in the car. Matt Sorum, I think, personally, is a better drummer than Steven Adler. And I know, again, a heresy to many. A lot of folks like, Adler's groove. But there's something about Sorum that I just enjoy a little bit more. And I think I always have. A little bit harder hitting. He beats the living shit out of his snare drum. And I like he's got a way of like doing these really kind of short, sharp little rolls and fills and stuff that I just think is cool. I always have thought so. Anyway, that's just a very random thought that I had that I absolutely had to share. David Crosby, legendary co-founder of Birds and Crosby, Stills and Nash, dies at 81. Condolences to his family. Although my dad was a big fan of Crosby, Stills and Nash, but not one of the bands that necessarily transferred across to me. I think of the stuff that he liked. He was also into things like Fleetwood Mac and stuff like that. And I hated that when I was young. Absolutely despised it. Now I like it, but the only stuff that I really got into growing up that he was into was Creedence Clearwater. I really like Bob Dylan, so stuff like that. Again, random, but I thought I would share my. Some of you will know my dad went blind from diabetes about 3 months after he retired. Basically, one of the things that I never knew happens when you're diabetic is the ocular nerve in your eye can sometimes start getting. It essentially almost eats itself. It like completely disintegrates. And that's what happened with him. The way he explained it to me was, it started in one eye, then very rapidly moved to the next eye. And he said it was like, one of those dimmer switches where every single day the switch was just turned, 2 clicks closer to being completely dark. And, now he sees absolutely nothing. But anyway, the point of me bringing this up is I gave him for Christmas a Google Nest speaker. And really brought a warmth to the cockles of my heart to that. He was able to use it to listen to music and listen to podcasts and kind of have access to part of the world that frankly he hasn't been able to have for 7 years. So talking about Fleetwood Mac reminded me of that, because I did say to Paige, like I can't imagine how absolutely fucking horrific it would be to not be able to listen to the music I want to listen to, as an example, for 7 years straight. So, as much as I don't necessarily want AI and the speakers listening to my every word in my house, technology does, or Google's surveillance technology does have its uses. Okay, let's carry on. Obituaries: Donald Tardy defends production on Metallica's and Justice for All album. I thought it was killer. I didn't mind it. And I think Justice for All has some of their best songs. I know they don't like playing Eye of the Beholder, but I love it. Shortest Straw is great. Blackened is fantastic. The song in Justice for All is good. I mean, I think wall to wall, it's a superb record. Reunited original lineup of Biohazard to perform at this year's Blue Ridge Rock Festival. I am still planning to go to Bloodstock to see them. As much as I don't like festivals, or at least open-air festivals, like the Reaper Fest is going to be different because it's in a venue. It's basically just like a lot of bands playing, so that's fine. But, open-air festivals, camping with a bunch of fucking smelly Neanderthals, using portaloos and things like that, that's not for me. But I'm willing to very briefly make an exception and go see Biohazard because they are fucking excellent. Screaming Trees bassist Van Connor dead at 55. I like the Screaming Trees, like Mark Lanigan more. Mark Lanigan, of course, used to be the Screaming Trees vocalist. I have mentioned it before on the podcast, but I strongly recommend, if you've ever listened to half a Mark Lanigan song and enjoyed it, make sure that you either read his autobiography or you listen to it on Audible. It's actually him reading it on Audible, which kind of makes it feel a little bit more personal. But it's a wild-ass story. It's very sad as well because, the guy seems to have come full circle in his life. And then, when he had finally reached a place where he was, at least reasonably sober and, felt at peace with things, he sadly passed away. So I felt a little morose in the aftermath of having listened to the book, but it really is very, very good. It's probably, in terms of like music books, music autobiographies, I'd say without equal. It is fantastic. Okay, folks, is there anything else here? Ex-Judas Priest singer Tim Ripper Owens has lost 50 pounds since last summer. On that photo, he's a little on the soy boy side, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, great for him for losing 50 pounds. I would like to lose about 20 to 25 this year. I think I might have mentioned this to Nathan as well, but the amount of meat and the amount of sweet shit and fucking wine I drank, the amount of calories that I consumed on a daily basis in South Africa probably offset the carbon the carbon reduction of at least 100 vegans. So I do need to lose a bit of weight. But yeah, 50 pounds is not bad, especially when you're when you're reasonably seasoned. Because I don't know how old Ripper Owens is, but I would imagine he's in his 50s. Glenn Danzig announces Danzig sings Elvis concert at Hollywood's Montalban Theatre. I would so desperately have wanted that to read Danzig sings Danzig 6. Danzig 6 and 7. I would fucking get in a boat like Greta Thunberg and row my way to America to see that. By the way, did you guys see the Greta Thunberg staged arrest? There was these videos that came out of her supposedly being dragged away from some fucking climate protest in Germany, I believe it was, and then the video leaked of her, chopping it up with a policeman, taking photos, laughing, taking selfies. So it was clearly rehearsed, clearly staged, and of course, the vast majority of buffoons will, walk away from that going, "Oh, she's so inspiring, standing up for what she believes in." Increasingly, what I'm starting to believe is, people will call this a straw man and a conspiracy theory. I don't personally think that it is. I would like to hear an argument that tells me I'm wrong. And as a matter of fact, I desperately hope I could hear an argument one day that proves me wrong, but I don't think that I am. But what I'm increasingly starting to believe is that people like Greta Thunberg, the middle class entitled, actually not even the middle class, the posh, rich, entitled riffraff in groups like Just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion, they're basically just a mouthpiece for the Davos elites, because younger people, and I think maybe the society at large, the civilians at large, they're not going to listen to, a fucking James Bond villain like Klaus Schwab, or a dusty old fart like Al Gore telling them to, stop flying, stop driving cars, stop eating meat, stop drinking coffee, I saw was now the latest, in the name of climate change. So, those people that I've just mentioned now, they're either directly in cahoots or they're the useful idiots, to borrow a Marxist term. But they're definitely the mouthpiece for the message. They make the message more palatable. Because on top of the fact that the message wouldn't necessarily be palatable coming directly from an Al Gore or a Klaus Schwab, the reality of it is those people don't, by any stretch of the imagination, follow a single word of what they say or what they expect of us to do. At the Davos gathering to discuss climate change, where I think this whole coffee malarkey came up recently, I read an article on, I think it was on Yahoo Finance, that said there was a total of over 1,040 private jet flights, including one that only covered a distance of 13 miles taken to get to Davos. Now, you tell me whether these people are genuinely serious that we have 10 years to live and we have to ditch fossil fuels and, the world is about to implode. I mean, I'm all for taking better care of the planet. I'm not a climate change denier by any stretch of the imagination. There's no doubt about it that there's a lot more that we need to do in order to take better care of the planet. But I believe that the solution lies in better technology. I do not believe that the solution is for you and I to stop driving, or you and I to stop eating meat, or you and I to not be allowed to take our, annual flight to go on holiday abroad, when these motherfuckers live in absolute colossal mansions that consumes God knows how much energy, are flying around in private jets, and by all accounts, living it up in places like Davos. I mean, I haven't seen any of the menus there, but I think at the, was it the COP27 or COP28 or whatever they did last year in Egypt, if you look at the menu there, it looked like a fucking feast. It was chicken, steaks, they were living well, they were living healthy. And then, of course, I also hear that in Davos this year, they enjoyed meat of a different variety. because apparently it's a golden period for prostitutes when the Davos Elite turn up. So it's a little like I said on the episode where I had Svartalv Alvarsson up. These motherfuckers will tell you to do stuff that they would never ever do themselves, and for that very reason, I will never take any of them seriously. All right, let's see if there's one more, and then we can get this wrapped up. Joey Belladonna reflects on getting fired from Anthrax. Sometimes there's just no reason for why relationships end. Joey Belladonna has once again commented on his original split with Anthrax, saying sometimes there's just no reasons for why relationships end. Belladonna, whose most recent return to Anthrax was officially announced in May 2010, was originally the lead singer of Anthrax from 1984 to 1992, and was considered part of the influential thrash metal group's classic lineup alongside guitarists Dan Spitz and Scott Ian, bassist Frank Bello, and drummer Charlie Benante, which reunited and toured during 2005 and 2006. His voice was featured on over 10 albums, which reportedly sold 8 million copies worldwide. The 62-year-old upstate New York-based singer reflected on returning to Anthrax during an interview with Canada's The Metal Voice. You all know my thoughts on this. I was devastated when he returned, because I felt John Bush was vastly superior, and I still contend that Sound of White Noise is a superb record. I know a lot of people don't like it. It's not a thrash album, that's for sure, but it's a fantastic metal record, and John Bush did all of those songs fantastically well, and on stage it was just a different story. He made all those old records sound great, all those old hits. He was a better frontman. Belladonna to me just looks like, you know, the uncle that you're embarrassed to have around for Christmas when he's on stage. But anyway, let's not dwell on that. Belladonna here says, some people were like, what? Are you nuts? You've been in relationships. It's kind of the same idea. You can either be on the same page, or you can be a little deviant and send it off course and expect a lot more from someone that you're not doing your part. And what are the reasons? There's a lot to it too. Sometimes there's just no reason for it. And what do you get from it? And then you've got to backtrack, and then you've got to pick it up again, twice. So, word salad. He's not really saying an awful lot. Further down the article, he says, forget about that record without me, he continued, apparently referring to 1993's Sound of White Noise album, which featured John Bush on vocals. I could have been on that record regardless of what they came up with. Let's just pretend they didn't even write that record yet. That record would have been cool too, regardless of what you're already familiar with. I'm not saying whatever was on there wasn't right. I was in that car that rode into the record. I got sideswiped out of there. Sounds to me like there's still some ill feeling from Belladonna about being booted from the band. But I would also say that he would not have been able to carry off those Sounds of White Noise, or Sound of White Noise songs, for the simple reason it was just a big stylistic departure for Anthrax, and I don't think it would have suited his voice at all. It's a little bit like when you hear the Cannibal Corpse, they put out the tracks that were originally recorded for Vile. I think the record when Chris Barnes was due to be on it was called Created to Kill. But if you hear those songs, I mean, Barnes just sounds fucking terrible. It just doesn't work for him whatsoever. You know, the music is too fast, too technical to suit his voice. And really at the time, the best thing for him was to be in 6 Feet Under. Sadly, of course, we know what has happened to 6 Feet Under in the preceding years. But that is a topic for a different news rant altogether, and we have already covered it quite a bit on this show as it is. So on that note, my friends, I'm going to wrap it up. That's it for another episode of Into the Necrosphere. Thank you so much for checking out the show. Thank you as well to my friend Nathan Glover for coming on the podcast. Always a blast catching up with him. Remember, next week, episode 162 will be the YouTube live stream, the first ever Into the Necrosphere live episode. I'll be joined by Evan Hopper of Quell, as well as Dave Berardi. And for those of you guys that don't make it to the live stream, aside from the shame that you should feel in your daily life. Know that I will also post, fortunately for all of you, the audio version on Spotify, Apple, etc. a couple of days after that. But really, really excited about doing it. Hopefully it actually comes off as well. So otherwise, next week's going to be an interesting conversation with all of you. Anyways, in the meantime, my friends, whatever it is that you're doing, wherever it is that you are, stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you bad motherfuckers again next week.